Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. It's great to have you all here for this discussion on the draft amendment to the telecom cybersecurity rules, especially given the potential impact it has on the vast number of businesses it will probably affect. So basically what's happening with this amendment is that it's introducing a new category of entities that will be covered under the cybersecurity rules, and these entities are all the companies that use mobile numbers for user validation. So this includes anything from food delivery applications, e-commerce platforms, local retailers who are sending digital receipts, anything. So for businesses that have built their user onboarding, authentication, customer engagement, processes around mobile verification, including basically everything that I mentioned earlier, these rules introduce fundamental questions about how operational continuity will work. What will their cost structures be? Things they'll need to change for regulatory compliance. So with today's discussion, we have two major goals. One of them is to shed light on the foreseeable issues and the potential questions that these rules sort of raise. And the second is to make actionable recommendations on how the government can sort of protect cybersecurity while at the same time ensuring that business interests and users are also equally protected. So besides concerns with businesses, there are other issues with these rules that we must address, and I'll run you through a presentation for that. Yeah, let's just quickly jump into a presentation, but before we do, I wanted to thank our sponsors for the discussion, PhonePe and Truecaller. I also wanted to thank our community partners, Internet Freedom Foundation, Cuts International, and Broadband Forum. Okay, so if anybody attends MediaNama's discussion, this is pretty straightforward. We are not lawyers, and although I think you can't see that very well, but yeah, so this presentation is just for informational purposes. We're not lawyers, and it's based on publicly available information, copy of the rules that everybody has looked at here. So yeah, these are the things that we'll largely cover. The draft amendment, this new category of businesses, they're called TIUEs, the platform that they're supposed to use for user verification, the obligations for the TIUEs, fee structures, privacy concerns and ambiguities, business impact, and then regulatory concerns. So yeah, first and probably the biggest question that there is with these rules is what is a telecom identifier? So these can be phone numbers or any other identifiers used with telecom networks. So on a theoretical basis, I think IP addresses also fall within the category of telecom identifiers. And then TIUEs are businesses that use telecom identifiers. So this is any entities that includes, let's say, telecom businesses. It includes all the other businesses I mentioned that identify their users or deliver services based on using telecom identifiers. The MVN platform that they're bringing in is going to be a government-run service which allows the businesses, the TIUEs, and this can include government agencies, by the way, to validate whether a telecom identifier that a user is claiming is theirs actually corresponds to them within telecom companies' databases. So who is a TIUE? Huge question. We honestly don't really know. Any service that uses a mobile number for identification would be a TIUE. Vast number of businesses, Swiggy, Zomato, WhatsApp, malls, everything will be here. The definition is vague and broad. And there's a lot of concerns about this, whether this even within the categories of businesses that are included within the scope of TIUEs actually even fall within the scope of the Telecom Act, or these rules, or the DoT's jurisdiction, which are things, of course, we'll take you guys through the discussions. The key obligations for TIUEs are that they have to share data related to the telecom identifiers with the government. They have to provide this data at designated points throughout digital means. The government can then cross-share this data with telecom companies, with users, with government agencies, and with other TIUEs for cybersecurity purposes. TIUEs have to follow directions to validate users. So basically what the rules say is that, and this is at least my reading, there is no specific quote-unquote mandate on verifying users. They can issue directions asking specific businesses to validate users via their platform. Also, yeah, we'll continue. So TIUs have to comply with directives if anybody is misusing telecom identifiers, so they can be asked to either suspend services for them temporarily or permanently. The government can also provide TIUEs with a list of identifiers that they have to suspend services for. If there is any conflict with regards to whether the TIUE thinks the service should be stopped for these people or not, then TIUEs have 30 days to respond with why an action should not be taken. So this is a huge thing, and we've mentioned it like in passing multiple times at this point. Do TIUEs fall within the scope of the Telecom Act? So there's a very big difference, and I think everybody in this room probably knows that the telecom bill, when it was first released, there was a lot of debate around whether OTTs were included under its scope. OTTs are communication platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, all those sort of services. So a large part of this debate was coming from the definition of message within the Act. So for reference, and I've not mentioned it here, but the definition was pretty big. Any signal, sign, writing, text, message, everything was included within the scope of message. Yeah, this basically meant that the definition was broad enough to include OTTs. Ashwini Vaishnav, who was then the Minister of Communications, never really clarified whether OTTs were included, at least not on the floor of the Parliament. Soon after the discussions on the telecom bill were over, though, he did put out a LinkedIn post which did say OTTs kept out, which was then taken down, after which he did an interview with the Economic Times where he did say that OTTs will continue to be regulated by the IT Act and do not fall under the scope of the Telecom Act. But one of the things to be considered here is that even if we stretch the definition of messages and we say that OTTs are included, what about the TIUEs that are not even OTTs? So yeah, that is something for you to consider as we go into the discussions. We already talked about what the MVN platform is. There's very limited information about how this works. Basically, what we understood was that the businesses or the government will make requests for verification. The MVN platform will route this request to telecom companies' databases. Telecom companies will respond in a specified format. Information will go back to the business. This verification will confirm if the telecom identifier is valid, and it can be done voluntarily by businesses or on a government directive. Little bit subjective whether this is voluntary or not. In terms of how much money businesses have to pay, if they're doing this voluntarily, quote unquote, then they have to pay ₹3 per request that they send in for validation, and if not, then they have to send ₹1.50 per request. So you can see the split in terms of what the telecom companies are going to make and what the government is going to make from this. Lots of business questions related to this, lots of stuff we'll probably get into during the panel as well. The biggest and probably the most fundamental one is what the DRT is trying to solve for. If the goal is to address fraud, is this a successful measure to address fraud? What sort of data will they expect from the TIUEs? Because one of the requirements is for TIUEs to provide information to the DoT as well. What the compliance costs will look like, whether it will have workflow disruptions for businesses that already have a system in place for onboarding. There's also a lot of privacy concerns, which is what the focus of the second panel for the day would be, and these are whether the government can mandate platforms to do so, or who are they going to mandate it for, whether this is voluntary, whether this is mandatory, ambiguities about what data the DoT will give back to these businesses. So will this be complete KYC details? So let's say in my case, will this be my name, my date of birth, all those sort of things, or will they just say, yes, this person who's claiming that they are Kamya Pandey are Kamya Pandey. So does regulating TIUEs even fall within the DoT scope? Again, huge question that we'll probably get into. Yeah, these are additional rules which will not be the focus of this discussion, but there's talks of creating a database for IMEIs as well, and there's going to be verification of IMEIs for used devices to ensure that they are not being misused, the devices, after they've been used once. Sellers are restricted from dealing with tampered IMEI devices. Yeah, that's about it in terms of what we wanted to cover. And without further ado, I'll just call on our panel. We have Seema Jindal, Head of Public Affairs, Truecaller. Rajiv Gupta, President PB FinTech. Hunar Janu, Head of Public Policy, InfoEdge. Jasroop Sandhu, VP Public Policy, Vodafone Idea. Amrinder Dhaliwal, Chief Product Officer, IndiaMart. Their panel will be on the impact of these rules on businesses. Thank you.
Thanks, Kavya. Hey, can everyone hear me? Yeah, it's working now. So I lie about my identity all the time. I sort of am joining a service, I create a... Sorry, we didn't anticipate such a large panel, but thank you all for joining us. I'm going to keep this pretty short. Like I was saying, I lie about my identity online all the time. If I'm creating an account on a service, my first thing is let me give a throwaway email address and a throwaway username. And the idea is that before I use a service, I don't want to give them all of my information. And I guess every one of you works in online business must face these issues about users misidentifying themselves. And I guess there is a need for you to be able to get the right identity of a user all the time. I'll start with you, Hunar. Is this facility to identify users useful for you to, let's say, prevent people like me from giving you a, let's say, listing a fake property on 99 acres, or that age-old issue which has impacted matrimonial sites of people misidentifying themselves? You know, that's something like, I think there was Aadhaar identification mandated for Jeevan Sathi, Shadi and matrimony once upon a time. We remember reporting a lot of those issues. So is identity verification useful for you?
Yeah, so first of all, I think to your remark about lying about your identity online, I would say it's not really, I mean, lying, it's you protecting your privacy, which is your right, fundamental right. So, so anyway, but thanks for the question. And I think in a sense, this does go to the heart of the issue, that I think there are businesses out there that do find some value in some kind of customer due diligence, right? And for those kinds of businesses, the market automatically has come up with solutions. And that's the beauty of the market, right? If there is a genuine business need, if people see value, then the market comes up with its own solutions. The government can definitely help there. Like for example, you know what the government has done with DPIs or UPI, because of its kind of role as a central coordinator, it can help create infrastructure, which it already, I mean, there are a lot of options of customer due diligence where government created solutions, Aadhaar and PAN and all of that kind of infrastructure is used. So the government has a big role to play there, but I think the big question is we should leave it open to the market to decide which businesses will find value and which businesses will not, and what they are ready to kind of pay for it. Until unless, I mean, the risk is obviously, I mean, it's on its basis, it's on a risk scale, right? So obviously where the risk is significant, like, you know, banking and money laundering and so on, the government can mandate, and it makes sense to mandate. But for all other cases where the risk is not that high or quite low, they should just leave it to the market, and if businesses find value in it, the market will give them solutions and they'll be happy to take it up. So, I mean, kind of a long answer, but in short, yes, I mean, there are parts of our business that might find value in it.
And how dependent are you on telecom identifiers like mobile numbers? Like, for the business, like, India's largely been a mobile-first country. Do all of your users have email addresses, or are you also onboarding users using mobile numbers alone?
Yeah.
In that sense, is there a broad number that you can give us saying X percentage of users are mobile only?
Yeah, yeah. I think like an overwhelming majority of users would be, as with any digital service these days, would be mobile-based, would be registered using their mobile numbers, and I think it obviously goes beyond just authentication to the fact that mobile has now become the primary connection to the internet. And so, you know, any kind of service or update or information or promotion, marketing, whatever you want to provide, mobile number becomes key, right? So it goes beyond just authentication and probably due diligence. And so that's why overwhelming
number.
Yeah.
The same thing. Are most of your users mobile users? Are they authenticated? Or I mean, both of you are parts of some of the oldest internet services in India. I'm just curious about whether your users are also mostly mobile first, mobile number only. How does this work? Like, if you had to verify everyone.
Sure. So, IndiaMart as a platform is, it has two sides actually. We're talking about buyer side and the supplier side. And for a marketplace like IndiaMart, trust and authenticity are very important. They are the fundamental basis which business happens online. Even physically we go to the market, you at least know there's a shop. When you're online, the only way to verify is all the information that is available about the user. So on the seller side, the problem is slightly different. I mean, there are ways to solve it because a lot of digital infrastructure has been created by the government, and even starting with a basic thing like a phone and an email. So it's a mandatory thing to have an email ID as well. So phone is the first identifier and then email is the second
So
identifier.
for you, email address is also mandatory?
On seller side.
On seller
so
side.
I want to talk about both the sides.
Okay.
Because if you're doing business, then you should have an email ID. You should be at least looking at it. Or you want to do online business, then generally a business should have an email ID.
Okay.
But that's the first level of entry into the platform. That does not mean that email IDs can be generated, phone numbers, you know how it goes with the phone numbers. So you can maybe create your catalog, but will you be visible on the marketplace? No, there are various levels that you need to cross, and in those levels, there is various ways to authenticate, like GST is one of the ways to authenticate, active GS is another way, Udyam, Aadhaar, many ways to, and penny drop is another way. So digital businesses are all the time looking for ways to ensure that there is real identity. And all that the government has done on the digital infra side has really helped, because we used to struggle a lot earlier to especially verify the sellers. I think that's the positive side of it. And phone number is the first level of identity. A phone number, and then there are some issues with this as well. How do you associate the name with the identity? So phone number is, I have this phone number. Now, is it your name? There's no proof to that.
So this actually helps you then, no?
Yes, certainly.
Because it gives you name and
Certainly.
number both.
On the other side, now if you look at buyer side, so on the buyer side, of course in India the businesses happen on phone, really not on email. So even though there is provision to provide your email ID, but it's not mandatory to have an email ID for a buyer. And then authenticity of the buyer, yes, I mean, if there are ways to make it authentic, one of the ways is to make sure that there's enough transaction history on the platform, which helps to authenticate. What did the buyer send requirement for? How long was he active? But this is a problem that we struggle with. My name is Amrinder, this is my phone number, there's no way to validate that. What is my history? There's no way to validate that. I can take, it just tells you that this phone number is with me and I had the OTP. So Truecaller provides some help there, but that is some help because that is just a collective data based out of phone books of everyone. But if there is a way to validate, I think it will be fantastic if a digital infrastructure can be built to figure out whom does this phone number belong to, what is the history of that, how long was that with that person, how many times was it ported, was the money paid on time, not on time. Many authentication, sitting with the telecom providers, they don't work with each other. So that information is not accessible. I think in that sense, it's really good. Because phone number is your identity. So if identity can be verified and there is an authentic way to verify that, that's very helpful.
We have a very large churn also in mobile numbers in the country, right? So identity, therefore, that keeps changing as well.
Which is good. I mean, we on our platform, we don't generally, if you have been on our platform and it's been more than 1 year since you verified your mobile, you have to verify again. We send OTP and you verify with OTP.
So how
So-
many verifications, identity verifications do you guys broadly would be doing in a year? In the
s-
millions, I'm assuming, right? Then
millions.
You have
So
about
just to
100
give you
million on
some
the
idea, on a monthly basis, 40-50 million users visit our platform on a
Hmm.
monthly basis. So you can
Hmm.
imagine, and there, in our business, it is not transaction, it's really inquiry. So almost about 5-6 million of them every month do transaction, which is inquiry in our business. And so all of them, anybody coming on the platform, does require authentication, does require validation, and phone number is the primary validation. Email, you don't really, on the buyer side especially, is not mandatory.
So
And that's
if I
not a
say about 100 million user verifications in a year, that's ballpark small. Minimum 100 million user verifications in a year?
100 million, you mean?
Yes. Minimum
Yeah,
100
even if
million.
that number is simple, if mathematics of that is if, and even if let's say a user comes on the platform, and there are two things, either when you send an inquiry, you could verify at that time, or you could also verify when the user comes to the platform. So when he or she takes an action, you can verify. It depends where you want to do it, but if it is just at the entry, then it is easily 500 million, 50 into 10, and maybe 250 million, as if you move the repeat part of it, 200 to 50 million users.
In a year.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
users coming on the platform, yeah. 200 to 250 million users, unique users come on the platform.
Rajiv, how does that number look for you?
Policy Bazaar and Paisa Bazaar, I think we handle about 8 to 10 lakh calls every day between both the entities, and about 5 lakh the calls get connected every day. So the number is quite huge. But financial services per se has this problem of facing a lot of frauds, and so we keep doing a lot of things through AI and our efforts to control frauds. While this attempt to bring something like this, in my opinion, is positive, however, I think a lot of discussions will need to happen with the ecosystem to understand how do we handle cost. There are system changes which one has to bring in. In fact, we just had a meeting on this a couple of days back. I brought all the minutes. It's unclear whether it is mandatory, or it is very, very, very unclear as of now. So why should something like this come up if it is not mandatory? Number one, and you're saying 3 rupees if you do it voluntarily, and if it is mandatory, it's 1.5. So that's something which I'm also a little confused in terms of what is the reason for this pricing, first of all. Then I think we're also looking at a lot of efforts in system overall. If such changes will have to be brought in, external dependency increases. And that also means customer hire. For a company like us, we are already discussing with.
Could you explain external dependency first?
You have one more KYC to do, right? One more, DOT will have to verify, validate, the number. So in addition to what we do, our own, onboarding.
But this
system,
could effectively also replace what you do, right, in terms of validation?
we will not replace it completely. We will
I think
obviously.
you could do a mic close.
Sorry, I
mic
said
close.
we will certainly not look at replacing this. It has to go through our systems and plus the external systems. So certainly we are not going to fully be dependent on the external system to begin with. We need to understand how effective it is, how does it work. So our current system, which is effective, which is working well, which is well understood by the entire, ecosystem. You have 20,000 telecallers, in the company. So it has to be slowly and, understood how effective it is. Once it is, probably it can become a single mode of verifying this. But certainly, I think cost implications are high. I was just doing some rough numbers. If we do, approximately, let's say, 5 million validations a month, it's going to cost you 3 crores. Or 1.5 crores, depending on whether it's mandatory or, it's voluntary. Training costs, of course, for people to follow this process. Data privacy again, so since you're sharing the numbers externally, you're responsible to maintain the data which, MVN validates. And that also means data privacy issues in future. Customer support and trust issues. For example, if there is a denial, by MVN system, the customer can be denied that service, and that's going to create a confusion. What methodology will MVN follow to, validate yes or no. But having said all this, the industry needs, the financial services industry certainly needs something like this. So obviously we'll have to sit with the METI, office to understand what they have in mind. They have to hear us out. So next week I'm meeting the person who drafted the policy, and so hopefully we'll have some interactions on what we think.
Do you have a choice between voluntary and mandatory here?
I don't know whether we have a choice. It says the price for voluntary is this, and if it is mandatory, then it is this. Now, whether it is really mandatory or why will they make it mandatory? That's unclear in the draft, right? If you read the draft, I don't think there is a very clear mention that this is going to be mandatory, or this is going to be made mandatory basis certain circumstances. So I think that's an issue which we are still contemplating.
I think if you go back to the slides, what it says is that there's certain like a central or a state government department may make this mandatory for you. So for example, in your case, you might find that the IRDA says this facility is available, and therefore the IRDA can issue an order saying this is mandatory, you have to use this.
Possible.
And then therefore for every single industry, it could be made mandatory for that industry by their respective industry regulator or that state or central level.
So that's what I was telling, your colleague, that there is a hidden agenda. Eventually, whether this gets mandatory, whether regulators will take a call, whether the METI will leave it to the regulators to take a call. Ultimately, it has to be, the same system will have to be followed by all regulators. It can't
It's
be
also not METI, that's the thing. So we'll get into the jurisdictional part because this is DoT.
correct. The DoT ultimately works under METI, right? It doesn't.
This is now separated,
It's now two separate-
different ministers.
Different ministers, okay. Anyway, great.
So in fact, the IT minister at Kamya had mentioned, had said in a press interview after the telecom bill was passed, because at that time he was also the telecom minister, that internet companies are not covered under this.
Okay.
But he's now got a different remit. Ministries are now separate. Ministry of Communications is now, Department of Telecommunications has now issued this under the Telecom Act.
But the minister is common for both.
No, not anymore.
That's not anymore.
Previous government versus this government, December last year versus now, big shift. So therefore, different ministers acting differently in a sense, or ministries acting differently.
So next week we have set up a meeting with the person who signed this draft policy. So hopefully we'll get to hear more from him directly. And he gets to hear from our team what exactly, are the challenges we think we'll face.
We'll be sending a note also based on our deliberations here.
Sure.
Seema, Truecaller does verification for many players in the space. Is this an add-on? Is this competition? How does this impact Truecaller?
So for us, how does it look like is that, of course, for us, mobile number is the starting point to say so. But having said that, do I really need the mandated identification mark? I don't think as a service, no. Definitely our service doesn't classify into a category where there are implications of any fraud happening or anything like that. But yes, as a user choice, if they want, perhaps they can do that, but then there are other methods which are available. So in a sense, it doesn't bring us any value except for the fact that there is already an OTP validation. Now, does that OTP validation going to be replaced or is it going to be supplemented? There are no answers to that. So I think for us, we are good with OTP validation, and we have other, no stakes.
But also
to
for
say
you,
so.
most of your users are onboarded using mobile number as an identifier.
Yes, yes.
So you also then become a TIU
Yes,
like everyone
definitely,
else.
yes, of course. I think no one in the digital ecosystem is escaped, because we all know that mobile has become the backbone, I would say, for anything and everything, even for getting receipts. If I go and any shopping, even I'm not their registered customers, there are many outlets who will send me a receipt. Or maybe I go to a hotel, I have to give a number, or they do validation. I think there is no escape from this.
So I had a question related to this. What does the phrase validation actually mean here? Because there are two ways of looking at validation, right? One is you validate a mobile number, which is I get an OTP, I use that OTP to validate myself, and therefore the fact that the person signing in has this number gets validated. That's the kind of validation which everybody does today. The other is that there is a name and an identification that comes in through the same mechanism over and above just the mobile number verification. So is it clear from the regulation whether this is just mobile number, that this number is the one, and therefore does this become a mechanism for OTPs, or is there more information that's going to be given?
So if you read the rules, there is a specific word called identification. So while the rules are not clear as to what exactly do they mean, are they going to be, validating a identity in a binary form, or is it gonna be saying that X number belongs to Y? So we do not have that visibility. Having said that, I want to question that whether identification will solve all the problem. If I know X mobile number belongs to me, will that eradicate all the frauds which are happening? And are we saying that wherever there is a mobile number, there is a propensity to have a fraudulent activity? I mean, are we even assessing that the ecosystem which we are trying to target, is it the entire ecosystem we are saying is not functioning, that it needs this kind of identification validation to say so?
So also, once the customer is validated, the question is, should he do it again and again? I mean, there is IRDA, there is SEBI, there is RBI, there is one bank giving a loan, the other bank giving a credit card, so already this discussion is on for KYC. Now, so how do we manage this? This is certainly going to create a big irritant, when it comes to dealing with
So
customers.
there is a question, Jasroop, that everyone's already verified because they've done KYC for their mobile number. Is there a need for another verification or a validation here, for one?
Yes, because the KYC done with the mobile operator is purely with the operator or the telecom operator.
Correct, but then if there is a fraud, can't that
Yes.
information be sought from the operator with respect to the fraud, rather than having to verify everyone all over again for every single internet service?
But there are frauds that are happening on platforms which use the mobile number as an identifier, where the identity of the person is actually not ascertainable. And in those cases, because of the digital frauds that are happening, this is the intent of the government to bring about some bit of, trust in the ecosystem to ensure that those platforms do provide some kind of a, validated user account for their services.
That is an interesting word that you use, to bring
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah.
So there are frauds happening using mobile numbers in any case,
Yes.
irrespective of that same KYC process which mobile operators have followed.
Right.
If that hasn't brought trust into the system, how will this bring trust into the system?
So it is a multi-pronged approach. The telecom operators are also doing their bit, and now it is the other players in the ecosystem who also use the mobile numbers for their digital services, which need to also contribute to ensure that overall the trust is built.
But then if the information that's going to be given to a player like a Policy Bazaar, an IndiaMart, or an Info Edge,
Yeah.
or a Truecaller,
Yeah.
is going to be the same information that is with the telecom operator, right? I'm assuming that
Then
the
it is good. Then it is absolutely fine. That means the trust
How?
is built.
How is it? Because if I've given a fake name for my mobile number registration,
Yes.
the same fake name will be then given to all of these guys. So how does it build trust? It just expands the impact of an unreliable system, because frauds are still happening on mobile.
Yeah, but mobile frauds are still less now on account of the KYC mandates that the DoT has
But
ensured
the
in
KYC
terms
mandates have been for years.
but they have
And that-
changed in terms of the level of compliance, in the sense that the process was earlier eKYC is now eKYC Aadhaar based, as opposed to the earlier process which was paper KYC.
So the
So the-
eKYC and
So the
the
subscriber
sure.
verification process has also improved over the years
So-
in the last 2 decades.
so here's the thing. Over the last 3 years at least, after Vikram introduced the Astra database to us inadvertently in one of our discussions, very advertently in one of our discussions, that was about 3 years ago, 2 years ago. Therefore, the video KYC verification process through the Astra database has been there for at least 2 years.
Yes.
Frauds haven't reduced. So if numerically frauds haven't reduced, amount of fraud hasn't reduced, how is bringing the same identifier to a different ecosystem going to increase trust when it just when your existing system doesn't work?
No, frauds haven't reduced in telecom domain or in other
No, no,
ecosystems.
overall
Yeah,
fraud.
yeah, so,
So if your
That's because-
code, if your source data, because Vikram, I remember saying that people like hide half their face with a pallu and and do a video KYC and they still get a number. And someone told us that SIM cards are being bought by the duffel bag. So if your core source database itself is not reliable, which is what it seems like, how is this, and I'm only inquiring, how is this going to increase trust?
no, I don't think it would be correct to say that the core database of telecom operators is not reliable. It is reliable on account of the KYC processes that the DoT has introduced and the operators are
But the frauds are still
working
there.
with. But those frauds are on account of the other platforms not, validating their services that they are providing with
No,
with just a simple mobile and OTP validation.
But there are mule
The
accounts
identity of the user is not
No, but there are mule accounts that are
confirmed.
getting the same numbers, right? So at level 1 itself, there are mule accounts that are getting the data. So if the mule account is also going to be used to create an account on Policy Bazaar or on Paisa Bazaar for a loan, then it's the same problem. The problem just moves to another platform with a fake identity. The fake identity then goes across levels, right?
I don't.
Starting with an unreliable core database because someone's used a mule to create it.
Yeah.
Logically, and I'm only inquiring because
Yes.
for me that word trust is an interesting one that you brought up.
Yes.
And at least my understanding is we're still having frauds with that core database.
I don't think that the core database is an issue. The issue is that the other platforms need to also, validate their user accounts basis the database of the operators, which is reliable because it is now based on new methods of updation of the KYCs.
Okay,
That's my take
we
on
will
it.
agree to
Yeah.
disagree on that. But
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's another aspect to it. So one is, of course, the validation part. But since we're talking about digital footprint in this case, so it's not just that this was registered with so-and-so telecom operator. Now there is a digital footprint available as well.
No, but it's not going back to the database.
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. We don't know what
Are
we will
you-
get out of it.
So are you okay with expanding the richness of that database by giving your data back to them?
No, I'm saying the telecom operator has the footprint. So if this is my phone number, the
Yes.
operator has the footprint that when was this number taken, how many times, where all it moved, which circle it moved in, was the payment made on time, not made on time. There are many patterns that are available. Now, whether that is being used or not, I don't know. Whether it's put together as a central database, they'll be used or not. But of course, some analytics need to sit on top of it.
So what's the kind of data you
Pure
would like?
KYC to KYC won't work. I mean, that's something that.
So what's the kind of data that you would like? So you agree pure
I'm
KYC
saying
and
if the
KYC will not
pattern,
be enough?
if I have the pattern, so obviously basic is this phone number belongs to this person. If that's established clearly with the documentation that was shared, that's the starting point. Now after that, if I know that this number was registered in, for example, Maharashtra, and it was registered 10 years ago, and regularly payment was made, then it was ported to Delhi, and then it was also, same user was using it, versus someone who's been taking 5 different phone numbers, 5 different circles. So the fraud has a pattern. So it's all about figuring out what the pattern is.
I have 5 numbers, by the way. Fair enough.
Here goes,
So-
I won't ask you why do you have 5 numbers.
So,
And I won't tell your wife also.
All privacy related. But here's, I think it raises an interesting point about patterns. So one, you would like pattern data to improve your detection systems, correct?
No, not I'm saying it's like
No,
Sybil,
no,
right?
you would like the pattern data from the telecom operators to improve your
I'm
systems.
saying the central system that is being proposed has to do more than just KYC to KYC pass on. I mean, it has to do some analytics and on top of it, like Sybil. It captures all the pattern, all the behavior, and then using that it gives a score. So similarly, there has to be a score saying that, okay, this was basis the telecom behavior of the user, this is the score, and this is red or green or yellow. Without that, it won't work. I mean, it's not just, anyway, Aadhaar is there, your question is right. What's the point? Aadhaar or KYC is already done. What's the value add? Value add will come from the data that exists with the telecom operator, which gets used, and it is put together across operators.
Well, I won't start a conversation on the reliability of Aadhaar data, but this itself is this is expansive scope. My question is then, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so when you're saying that there has to be more data, precisely, it's not that the data is not available. It's available with telcos. It's being shared in some form and shape with DoT. But the only problem is that there are different systems for that. And none
That's
of the
very-
systems are talking, right?
Very non-transparent sharing.
Yes, and to say so, while I don't endorse that identification will solve, presumably identification will solve some of the problems. I'm saying, why do we need a different system for that? Today they have launched FRI, right? And they share certain signals.
Sorry,
with
what's
bad
FRI?
alert. That's a financial risk intelligence portal which DoD has launched. And they are sharing certain intel or risk matrix against a number to banks, and then banks flag, is it?
So
I
then
mean,
why
not
do we need
everybody
this?
has- Yeah.
Why
So
do
I'm
we need
saying,
this?
saying
So
as
that's
a
the question.
symbol,
For
that's a neutral
identification,
point
it's
you can
not
write.
required. I mean,
It's
you
not
need
re-
it for more than that. Just,
Yes.
So
I mean,
then-
maybe just the
And even
name
for
part.
identification, you don't need a system. Perhaps you can use the existing system to pass that. for
Let's
bad
also then
actors, right?
understand, maybe Rasub, you can tell us what is the kind of data that is from a telecom operator that is given to the government when a user is being registered on a mobile, for a mobile number. So to understand, like, is there information about whether the number has been ported, whether they collect any kind of billing information saying how frequently has a recharge been done or how frequently have bills been paid. That kind of intelligence that, let's say, the internet ecosystem would seek to enhance their own fraud prevention.
Yeah.
What data do you guys collect and give to the government?
To the government.
Yes.
To the government, we are required to give only the subscriber verification related, the first time activation of the connection related data. So there are specific
So name, ID,
KYC,
video.
demographic information,
Okay.
that photograph, all of that information will be given. It does not contain information regarding past billing information, which has been mentioned. But yes, these kind of other informations are available with the telecom operators for providing these information to other businesses based on their, like he mentioned, red, yellow, or green, in terms of the customer, whether how genuine the customer is or how good the customer is for the other businesses. Those things are available separately, but these are subscriber verification and identity related things that we are compliant.
Do we have any clarity on
So
whether it
again,
is Astra that's
just-
being used?
Pardon?
Do we have any clarity whether this database will be the Astra database or is a new thing going to get created?
In
from the-
this
yeah.
proposal, in this draft, I think this is more centered only on the authentication or the validation of the mobile number identity of the user. It is not
So identity means
taking
name.
taking it, so like for example, he mentioned that there'll be information about the Policy Bazaar, the person who's trying to register on Policy Bazaar, name is so-and-so. That kind of information is being validated with the operator database, and in fact, that's going to be responded to by the operator that yes, it is correct or not correct as per the operator's information database in terms of KYC.
So,
So not additional information of port in, port out. I think that is not yet clear to us also, whether that would be covered or not. In our understanding, that is not likely to be the case.
okay. Seema, you wanted to respond to
Yes,
something.
So, Jasroop, there is another set of data, if you recall. KYC, I agree, there are certain parameters you share and you don't share, of course, as a telco, what is the credibility of the customer, that stays vault. But there is a suspected or a gray number data, right? That as a part of licensing obligation, we do share with DoT, wherein you share the calling pattern, incoming, outgoing ratio,
Yeah.
number diversity,
Yes.
calling a party, what is the pattern, right?
Yes.
So those are enough indicators, and those indicators.
Those are given by telecom openers
Yes,
to DoT?
DoT,
Yeah. That
yes.
is for fraud
That's
prevention.
a periodic,
Fraud
yes.
prevention.
That's a periodic data, and those parameters keep changing. Those are not openly disclosed for obvious reasons. So that intelligence, of course, goes to DoT. Could be the source of FRI working on this as one of the parameters or input matrix.
Hunar, there's this interesting idea that came up through this conversation so far, that more data would be useful for fraud prevention. Would you, for example, as a company, be open to the idea of actually, because the regulation also specifically states that that data can be sought from companies as well, right, about users. So would you be open to the idea of contributing to the fraud detection database by giving data across 99 acres, Naukri, Jeevan Sathi, Shiksha, to the DoT, and therefore contributing to the fraud prevention database?
So I think there are probably two parts of the question. One is giving data to the government, and second, the earlier part is with whatever infrastructure already exists and data already exists, do we already have enough, and it is just a question of making that more effective, like, you know. So I mean, in the first part of the question, we obviously, I mean, the government already has extensive powers for data disclosure, right? Through various mechanisms, you know.
What are the regulations that are used for data disclosures?
I mean, so maybe you have the IT Act. There is DoT can ask for data disclosures related to traffic patterns and so on.
Okay.
You have CRPC. I mean, the police can ask for data disclosures under CRPC. So I think like there is enough. The government has enough authority to ask for data, and I'm assuming like the proportionality and necessity of all of that. That is a separate question.
But are there restrictions in terms of necessity? Are there regulatory restrictions on what are the circumstances in which this data can be shared? Because in these rules, there are no safeguards in place.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's more of a like, you know, I guess a legal question from a business perspective. We are usually, I mean, you know, if the government asks for some data, we obviously provide that. We're kind of obligated to provide that. Right? Putting in safeguards, you know, legal safeguards and all of that. I think there is a lot of work that can be done there, frankly, even with existing regulations that allow for data disclosure, right? And this one, especially with this one, I don't think like there is any mention of
Any safeguards?
Any safeguards here. So there's a lot of scope there, and might be like, you know, the panel we have after this. They would, I mean, those are the experts much better placed to kind of go into the details of what that should look like. And but coming back to the original point, what I'm trying to say is that the government already has enough authority across various instruments and to ask for data, whatever data they think is required. And usually, I mean, usually businesses provide that data, right? Like, I mean, if the government.
But it's different from providing it on a case-by-case basis. I'm saying, would you be open to the idea of providing certain, like a set of data on a regular basis, which can be used for fraud prevention? Because that could be a demand under these rules. You never know, because the rules are fairly open.
Yeah, definitely.
So if I had to add, you know, I would say that this should be done. In my opinion, voluntary sharing of data of frauds, data of any type of incident. It could be individuals receiving, you know, fraud calls. It could be companies receiving fraud calls. There should be a system of sharing. Every corporate, every entity, whether it is BFSI, non-BFSI, should be able to share this data centrally, and vice versa. The calls which are getting validated should also get validated through the fraud, you know, mechanism, so that this then becomes a little more useful and effective.
But this seems separate from the fraud system that Seema talked about.
I know, but I'm just saying that somewhere the integration will have to take place, because if the idea is to protect frauds and if your idea is to protect the risk, it's not about only mobile number validation. Mobile number validation will not tell me whether I'm a fraud or not fraud, right? I mean, they may validate and say this is Rajiv Kumar Gupta, number is correct. But it's Rajiv Kumar Gupta, the same person who has probably done some fraud somewhere else, that doesn't get, you know, identified here. So that integration will certainly solve the purpose of why, you know, MNV wants to do this.
But you said voluntary. We don't need a regulation for voluntary disclosure, frankly.
I'm saying voluntary.
So
Here it should be.
This looks like it's going to be mandatory.
It should be mandatory. It should be made compulsory. If all the ecosystem players are willing to share data.
Willing doesn't come into the picture, then, na?
I'm saying it
So
should
let's
be made
say-
mandatory.
Let's say there are let's say 15,000 startups in India.
Correct.
All of them use mobile numbers for validation.
Correct.
Should 15,000 companies be mandated to provide information to the government for every user who signs up and their patterns so as to enable fraud prevention?
Now, providing every user data is different from saying providing data of every fraud. So if I am, if in my
Oh,
company.
so you're saying, you're separating it from user data from fraud then?
Data, correct. So if I am facing X number of frauds every day, Policy Bazaar and Paisa Bazaar should be able to supply to the ecosystem. This is the list of people who have done fraudulent transactions or who have been identified, you know,
Oh, so-
as people to be careful.
But let's be very clear, this regulation is not about fraud data. This regulation is about user data.
I understood. I understood. I'm just saying that the user data will get better used, or the acceptance in the ecosystem will be much better if there can be some kind of integration with fraud data, in the sense.
Correct.
If this can also validate that the phone number is Rajiv Kumar Gupta, no fraud has been reported against his.
So you're not saying information for all users should be provided, just fraud information? Okay, but this regulation is specific to user information and not fraud information. So are you open to the idea of every user's information by every startup in India? And because everyone uses
If it
mobile
is-
numbers and
if it is
TUIs.
going to be made mandatory, obviously that is going to be provided, right?
Correct.
But I'm saying in addition to that, if that data can be through an API integration, you know, tell us that yes, while we are providing this information, government is giving a value-added service of coming back to you and saying that, listen, the number is genuine, but be careful. This
So
guy-
are you okay with providing user data if you get fraud data in return?
I'm okay as long as there is value-added service. One of the value-added services is the fraud data. I'm not saying it's conditional.
I'm sorry.
I'm not saying it's conditional, you know, I'm saying that if this effort, obviously there are a lot of discussions around how effective this will be in terms of ensuring customer, you know, doesn't face delays, customer doesn't face rejections. Cost issues will have to be discussed. The time and effort involved in terms of system changes and training will also have to be discussed. Draft paper per se will need discussion with the ecosystem players. But I'm saying for this to get better acceptance, this kind of value-added services, one of them being this, will certainly enhance the acceptance within the corporate ecosystem who use calls in a large number.
I think an important point in this is the privacy, because any data of a user that is with any platform, it has to comply with privacy laws. So the different lens to look at it. I totally agree on the fraud side. There should be some central place, because fraud has many patterns and it gets repeated across and data does not get shared. So that's a need, though it doesn't get covered under this particular provision, but if it can be done, that will be really helpful. But otherwise, using or sharing data of the user, privacy laws need to be totally taken into account.
Right now, we don't have a privacy law in operation because the rules haven't been issued yet.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It has to be all seen together. So everything is going digital, right? And as a user, if I think about myself and if I know that whatever I am doing digitally, it is going to be accessible to anybody without my consent, I'm not comfortable with it. So I cannot do that with my users as well. So there has to be a law. Government is supposed to have a privacy law, and there's so much talk about it. So even though things are running in parallel, at some point in time, they have to come together and we need to see the whole picture.
So if this draft is made mandatory, in any case, the data privacy laws come in place, right? I mean, if tomorrow you have to share your phone number with MNV as it's proposed, it's been mandatory by the government, right? So privacy laws will have to be taken care there itself.
That's just identification, but if you extend to, okay, what was my pattern, what was I doing?
Correct.
What did I purchase, not purchase? That's a very
All MNV
specific
responses will
information.
have to be also stored by us at the end of the day, you know, whatever they say. So somewhere the data sharing is happening, but you are responsible for data privacy. You're right, absolutely right.
Yeah.
But all will have to work in parallel. It is not that, you know, one law can impact you. If this has to be introduced, I guess the data privacy law also will have to be taken care accordingly.
Yeah, so that's why in isolation, very difficult to understand what law is trying to do, because it's pure identification as we talked about. Phone number is already verified, because if I have the phone number, I have OTP. So why do you need to know whether that person has the phone or not? I have the phone because I put in the OTP.
That's what I said, yeah.
Then second thing is the name. Now name can be found out either, I mean, if I find out the bank, most correct database probably would be the bank database. Then to some extent UPI database, to some extent Truecaller database, to some extent telecom database. So these are like various places from where you can try to triangulate and validate. But just that is a very small use case that, okay.
So let me give you a small example
Yeah.
and tell me if this works. How does this work in your systems then? Say let's say, hypothetically, my father runs a shop that sells ball bearings for vehicles. And he's not very digitally savvy. So I use my number and register an account in his name. And I manage that account, but it is in his name. The moment you have to verify that, the name that will show up will be different. Will you have to reject it? In the same way, for property listings, many people in the younger generation register accounts on 99 acres for their parents who might be property owners. How do you reconcile that anomaly that will pop up more frequently than anyone can expect? Because quite often people don't use their own numbers or ask someone in their team to just set something up.
No, what you're saying is actually there. This is how a lot of business gets done. And it may not be father, son, it may be my friend, another friend, or could be any case. So, but that's the premise of digital business, right?
Yeah, and I gave that example because,
there's no way for me to verify that you were doing business on behalf of your father. You're saying that. So if I'm digitally representing, then I have to represent myself. That's the only way to do it.
so I get that ball bearing example because Gautam Kapoor, who's one of the founders of Shiprocket, is a friend of mine. And his father has a ball bearing shop. And since college, I've known.
No, absolutely.
That
I know you're coming from a real use case.
He actually he listed his father's business online and gave his number.
Yeah,
So I'm just coming from that example.
I totally agree on that side, but I think the point is that what's the line between impersonation and doing it for someone else?
Yeah.
So
Correct.
that line can't be judged digitally. I mean, you need to have a method to do it.
So then this won't help you solve, might actually create a challenge with that
No,
situation.
this cannot be done. It is impersonation, I would say, because in this case, somebody else could also do it. How do I know there's a consent? And what's the system to find about the consent?
Correct. So then you would reject it.
Yeah, we'll put your name. I mean, we will not put your father's name, or that's what we will do, not reject. It'll be against your name.
Oh, so you'll use the government database and put that name.
Yeah, I mean, the phone number is in your name, the business will be in your name.
Jasup, how frequently does the database get renewed and names updated according to, because numbers churn very frequently.
Yes.
So how frequently is the database updated?
Every
Could
time.
you just use the mic, please?
Every time the number is churned, it's either through mobile number portability or it is just a churn of the number and the customer buys a new connection. In both the cases, it requires fresh activation at the other operator's end. So the customer who wants to churn out, whether through MNP or through organic churn, will have to undertake the KYC again. So every time there's a fresh activation, it is a fresh KYC.
So every time there's a fresh activation on a number,
Yes.
they might end up losing a user or a customer because the number's changed.
I didn't get that.
So if let's say 99 acres has validated a particular user with that particular name, and that user churns and that number churns out, that number is no longer valid anymore,
Yes.
right?
So
So
that
they'll
is
have
why
to go for the-
TRAI had earlier created a list which is now managed by DoT. It is known as Mobile Number Revocation List,
Okay.
MNVRL, where the list of the numbers that are disconnected or terminated permanently was made available for the other platforms, whether it is digital companies or whichever, to be able to validate whether their database is now correct with their customer in terms of the number change or not.
Understood. Anyone has any comments, any questions?
Also, just to add, within families, within families, you find that one name has been used for 4 numbers. The number which I gave to my children who are now majors, they still carry the same number.
They will get rejected
Right.
everywhere.
So question is, that problem will exist for customers in a big way, right? I mean, not everybody goes and changes,
The name and the telecom registry.
Correct.
Yeah, one of the 5 numbers I have, I picked up for my 2-year-old to give it to him when he's of age. So fair enough. So how do you then deal with that situation? Because they'll get rejected for everything.
It is. So
Your mic's off.
this is a genuine problem. I think I just realized when you spoke about those 5 numbers that within my family, 4 numbers are registered in my name. So my wife also carries my number, not because of any reason. I'm allowed to claim expenses, you know. So it's there in my name. I've given the phone number to her. You know.
And you're only allowed 8 numbers, right?
Correct.
Vikram?
Yeah, 9.
9. Now it's 9. They've increased by 1. Okay.
It was always 9.
Okay. That, Arun, mic, please.
Yeah, and just want to point out that Jio, which is the biggest telco, has no procedure whatsoever to change your identity, to change the transfer of ownership. Airtel and Vodafone have that process. Jio does not. So the way I did it was I had to port out to Airtel for 3 months, enjoy their free Netflix, and then port back with the same number.
There are a couple of Geo people in the room. You can have a conversation with them about this.
Please, guys, it takes 5
questions?
minutes.
Right there. Yeah.
Hi, Nikhil. I'm Akash from Digital Information. I want to understand the private market. So let's say how Vodafone shares data with, let's say, Amazon, or let's say mass verification. Or do you have these mediated players, let's say Gupshup or Two Factors, these intermediaries who are providing these OTT services to these companies? So what is the relationship with, let's say, Airtel, Jio, or Voda providing direct services to big companies? And what is your relationship with these startups or these intermediaries who are providing your OTT linked kind of services to these big companies? So how the private market operates, what's the pricing of, let's say, charge? Like, is it like 3 rupees with 0.1? How do you do differentiation with the big companies, small startups? What's the private market landscape right now? How telecom operators provide these services to big companies, small companies, intermediaries? What's the pricing game?
I'm afraid I don't have information on that, but we can take it offline.
Anyone else? Like, who's that question specifically for?
For the telecom operator or the companies, how do this use, let's say, direct geo services, or do you use intermediaries, startups to do this verification of OTP?
I think the OTP, there's pretty much always a middle layer that does the OTP generation and validation.
Both, there is direct and middle layer as well. So it's a tech solution, you can say.
Many companies it's direct.
Yeah.
But as he rightly
Mics
says,
off.
I said for many companies it's direct, but there are people who use third-party services as well.
So is that 3 rupee very high, or it's
Are you talking about the MNB?
Yeah.
3 rupees.
1 point.
comparable to private markets?
1.5 is if it's 1.5 is if it's mandatory. Yeah. So 1.5 is if it's mandatory, as in if a government department mandates that you do this verification process or validation process, it's 1.5 rupees. If you do it on your own voluntarily, it's 3 rupees. And if you're a government department, it's free.
Correct. In general, I mean, if your question is compared to other validations that are done digitally, like GST or other validations, this is very expensive.
Okay, what's a good number?
Is a good number, and obviously it depends on what is going to come out of it. See, right now,
What's the cost of an OTP?
I think on SMS it should be around 12 paisa or 15 paisa, depends volume game it is. So it can be as low as 8 paisa also.
So if you follow the money, who makes money from this entire setup?
And also if you ask the OTP on OTTs, that's also like maybe double the cost of what SMS is. So you can see the comparative in terms of 3 versus, say, I'll take 15
So
paisa.
effectively, it's about 10x the cost if you use the
Yes,
government
definitely.
system. So if it gets mandated, your costs become 10x.
Yes.
So from a regulatory, sorry, yes. Mike. Also, anyone else with questions? We'll go back there to Aman. Anyone else?
The reason why I'm interjecting is because this is also a financial question. So Rajesh gave us data to begin with about how much it will cost companies to do validation this way. I was just wondering, are you then better off for it to like not be voluntary mandatory but actually mandatory? Is it financially better? Is it easier in terms of compliance? Because then you already well prepared for something like this as opposed to later having to change things.
Yeah, so as I told you, we are still unclear. Why it has to be voluntary and why it has to be mandatory, number one. So if it is mandatory, obviously we have no choice. That cost will get incurred in any case. Voluntarily, we have 3 rupees भरने वाले नहीं हैं. There's no question of even 1.5 is steep. He said 10x or 15x of what we pay otherwise, right?
So you're also dealing with statutory power over there. अगर वॉलंटरी में सिस्टम का कॉस्ट नहीं निकल रहा तो वो मैंडेटरी बन सकता है. That is a natural progression of things. Like if there's a system and its utilization is, say, 10% of maximum capacity, all they need to do is update the regulation or have someone issue a notification that for your sector, and yours will be one of the first two sectors to be impacted alongside payments, it will become mandatory to use this mechanism.
So I think her question was what happens. I think if it happens, it happens. We have to, there is no choice, right? If the government makes it mandatory, one has to find ways on how do we deal with it.
What would you want?
I think it requires discussion, both on pricing, both on the process. It's not so simple as it sounds that I say yes or no straight away. I mean, the draft policy in its current form certainly has a lot of issues around it.
So there is also one other fundamental shift that's taking place. Sorry, I'll just come back to you. There's a fundamental shift that's taking place over here, which is that every internet company that uses mobile numbers to register a user, a form of validates a user, effectively becomes something called a TIUE, and therefore they are regulated by the Department of Telecom separately, which means that the ability to, once you are regulated by the DoT under these regulations, the ability to issue more directions to you exists with them. How do you, are you okay with being regulated as a telecom entity? I mean, I know you're used to a regulated life since 2011, after those terrible regulations from the IRDA came out that almost killed the business. I remember that time. Are you okay being a regulated entity by another department? Having another regulator?
To be very honest, IRDA did not understand, the online business when we started. So it was not more than killing, it is lack of understanding. I think from 2008, it took several years for us to refine the web aggregator rules and people to understand.
Now, regulations.
Now I'm sure you know.
I know them very well.
Quite closely. But honestly speaking, with the kind of issues which are happening around with. The other day we were in a closed door meeting with FM. She spoke about deep fakes and she spoke about heavily things being misused. So while AI is great, cybersecurity continues to be a big threat. So this is certainly a positive step. That's how I started saying that we are okay. But provided this is refined in consultation with the ecosystem across whether it is cost or whether it is data privacy. So accepting a regulation in the interest of the overall ecosystem, I think we are quite open to that.
Okay.
From internet businesses point of view, this is not acceptable. We would not like to be regulated. As it's heavy cost to business without clarity on what's the value that's going to come out of it. So definitely not.
So you don't see yourself as a telecom business?
Not at all. I mean, then everything is telecom. If you apply that definition, everybody having a phone is a telecom business.
Well, every telecom operator is effectively an ISP now, so logically, but Hunar? Telecom business?
Of course not. Of course not. Yeah, no, I mean, these are very serious questions, right? Like a regulated entity or regulated business is very different, and the obligations you have and so on. So it's a very serious question. You are right. I think it requires a lot more discussion, but I think there are two separate things here which are getting conflated a bit. One is whether it should be mandatory or not, and then everybody comes under telecom. The other is whether it is effective or not, and to know whether it is effective or not, we have to know what is the goal, what is it trying to achieve. And I think right now those two are getting conflated, saying that if we make it mandatory, then it might become effective and vice versa and so on. I think we need separate discussions on this. First, we need to figure out what is the goal and whether for that goal this is effective. And then we come to for whom it should be mandatory or not.
Can you explain that part? Because
so
for whom, see, they're saying that if a telecom identifier is used, effectively you are regulated under telecommunication rules.
So that's what I'm saying.
So they can't say, okay, only payments will be regulated because they don't have a telecom mechanism to bring you under the rules for just payments. So it's either all or nothing here, right? They have nothing else to go with. Logically.
Yeah, I mean, they can take a risk-based approach, right? Like, what is the level of risk your business is exposed to opposing. And that is where the KYC things comes from, right? Customer due diligence. But to be able to take that risk-based approach, you have to first identify, okay, what is the risk we are trying to identify, to address, how effective this would be in addressing that, and then you identify, okay, which all businesses pose that risk or are exposed to it. For example, if I take a mobile number for marketing purposes, I mean, it doesn't make any sense for me to verify the identity of the person. Like somebody gives me a mobile number, I'll send them marketing messages, fine. There is no risk there, right? And a lot of use cases are like that. But if somebody is using a mobile number for banking purposes, then yes, and that's why KYC exists. So what I'm trying to say is that I think it requires a lot of discussion in terms of what is the objective, and then take a graded approach in terms of whom it should be mandatory for and where it should be left to a market mechanism.
And the objectives are not clear right now.
I don't think so. Like, is it addressing? So okay, so the stated objective is cybersecurity, which in itself is quite vague. Now, are we talking about telecom cybersecurity of telecom services and infra, or are we talking about sectoral cybersecurity?
Potentially, because under these rules, you are a telecom entity now.
So again, see, we are now conflating mandatory.
The internet is a telecom sector under these rules.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I think what is happening is that the question of who is covered mandatory is getting conflated with what is the objective of this. And that's why it's going a bit in circles. So every time somebody tries to identify the objective, people say it doesn't matter because you are already obligated to do it. And I think we need to separate those two questions and deal with them specifically. And then requires a lot of discussion.
So I think here the purpose is significant. Why we all are sitting, or maybe perhaps we would like to support in some form or fashion. That's what I've gathered from some co-panelists. So objective is primemost. Now my question is that, okay, whatever is stated, we take it on face value, saying that, okay, we want to enhance cybersecurity frameworks. But is this, the identification, as you said, going to solve it? No. So when we say there is a lot of data which is lying, or maybe perhaps the other regulated sectors would need certain signals, right, to enhance that. Maybe DoT also needs those signals, and they do capture those signals. And perhaps why the focus is not on the already using the existing systems, have those systems speaking to each other, let those systems share signals between them, let people or let the impacted entity share bad actors. I don't think there will be any justification for any entity to say, I don't want to share the fraudulent data. No, I think everybody would be keen to support it in a way. So if the intent is to actually address that problem, perhaps we'll have to look at it at a different lens. Beyond identification, it doesn't look like that it's solving a problem. It looks like a OTP validation with one more attribute of name being there. Now, whether all the digital business require that, no. But unfortunately, there's no distinction which has been created in that.
Honar, I just wanted to.
Aman's been waiting for a while.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it feeds into the conversation because what you're talking about is as soon as you're using a mobile number in your customer journey in any way, shape or form, Nikhil said you're a telecom identifier user entity.
I'm not saying that.
The rules say that.
Rules are saying that.
But so then are you effectively then pushing businesses to stop using mobile numbers? In what all sectors is that possible? Because one, you use mobile numbers because it's convenient, everyone's using devices on their phone. It's a quick, low friction method of doing validation. But at a cost benefit level, would I rather be regulated by another regulator now, or would I take a few drop-offs, do email validation? And what does that do overall for your cybersecurity implications here, right? Like the fact that people are using mobile numbers, which at least we believe at the back end have good KYC done. So my question really is, do you anticipate as businesses being willing to move away from mobile number as part of your onboarding and move to other mechanisms like email, etc.?
I don't see that happening. And the reason we are sitting here is because we can consult and we can give our views. Otherwise, if it is unilateral, then any law would get passed just like that. So point is, mobile is the primary way of doing business, and it will continue to be. You have a computer in your hand, you can't take it away. And it
But what he's asking is mobile number the only way to validate still?
Yeah, that's the only way. There's no other way.
Aman, do you think this extends to IP addresses as well? Because Kamyat said that in the beginning. If it IP addresses, then that
They are also
it has
telecom
global
identifiers.
applicability then.
I'm not sure.
Also, there are global businesses that use mobile numbers to validate users. So then does this scope go beyond the...
I mean, maybe, my actual question is, lots of places you're able to log in with either email or phone, right? Maybe I take the phone option away and then everyone is using email.
It's not just login, it's identity. So a lot of people do not use I'm not talking about people who are not very familiar with emails. If you look at the younger generation, they don't have email IDs.
Yeah.
So how will they do business? How will platforms, how will e-commerce companies onboard those customers?
Also, Aman, at the end of the day, when we use calls, we also want to connect with the customer immediately, right? We call them and say that you called us, so or you went into a website. Are you looking for a policy? So on email you can't do all that, right? And so here you try to directly speak to the customer. Of the 8 lakh people or 10 lakh people who connect with us, or the kind of contacts we inbound and outbound put together, we connect with 5 lakh people. We call them back, and that's not going to be possible through mobile. At least for our business, Events.
Sumesh, mic over there, please.
Yeah, till the mic goes there, I just wanted to mention there is a specified purpose. So a while back, I think the previous version of the rules, they were discussed by the Committee on Delegated Legislation in Rajya Sabha. So there the Secretary of DoT had explained that the rules serve as an overarching framework for telecom cybersecurity, covering telecom service providers and users misusing telecom resources for purposes such as digital arrests or fraud. So fraud might be one of the reasons for these rules as well. I think it was clarified there. So if we are using that as any indication for why these rules are introduced, so that could, help identify what they're doing. Yeah, Sumesh.
All right, thank you. Obviously one of the points that we've been discussing is that the scope is so broad and it could apply to almost any service. If you look at this national telecom policy that came up, and when it is talking about the MNV platform, so it talks about 4 service sector entities: banking, insurance, social media, and e-governance. It also says etc., but I'm going to ignore that for now. But let's say in a revised version of the draft, it clarifies that only those entities which are using identifiers in these sectors would have to comply with this. Would it change how we are looking at this? Would it be proportional then, or would it actually add value?
Could you repeat the sectors again? Could you repeat the sectors, please?
Banking, insurance, social media, e-governance.
And etc.
I'm so for now.
That talks a lot.
Yeah, for now I'm not.
So then, if you look at in particular, I think the banking anyway does this. Insurance anyway does this validation. E-governance does the validation. The one that stands out for me is social media, because it completely removes your right to be anonymous online. Right? My handle Nixon started off as a pseudonymous handle I used to use everywhere, where I didn't want to identify myself. That's why my Twitter account was started with an anonymous name, and then that was 2007. So right, so over a period of time, and we had this discussion about 3 years ago on proportionality in identification, where when anyone goes online on a service, they first want to be anonymous, and in the absence of being anonymous, they become pseudonymous. So they create a throwaway address, they create a throwaway account, and then as they become more comfortable with identifying themselves, they use a real name. And then they might, for validation purposes in some instances, to protect that account, use their mobile number, right? But in those cases, you have a choice. So the moment this goes to social media, it means you're completely removing the right for someone to be pseudonymous online. And that then means it goes against the principle of data minimization. It also goes against the idea of choice. Then you're basically, and I don't know if you remember, but maybe you might not, about 7 years ago, there was this huge campaign globally against Meta, because Facebook, because Facebook had instituted a real name policy. And there was a massive pushback against a real name, policy, because there are vulnerable communities that don't want to identify themselves online. Like there are people who might be LGBTQ who take their own time to become comfortable coming out or identifying themselves online, but being pseudonymous or anonymous gives them a safe space. So this real name identification mandated across creates a vulnerability for vulnerable communities, basically, also. So just thought I'd address those four that you mentioned, the only one that stands out, because every other sector is effectively a regulated sector. But it's the unregulated ones that are then also being brought into the mix of being identified. And that's the way I see it, at least.
I think the point is that, yes, digital platforms do allow you to be anonymous, but the point is internet anonymity can't be at the cost of others. So the whole issue is that if you are anonymous today and you are doing legitimate stuff, of you're not trying to defraud somebody, it's fine. But the moment you try to defraud somebody by being anonymous, then you are not right, no?
So
you should be
I don't
identifiable at that stage, and it should not be that the digital platform company is also not able to identify you.
So
I think that is
would
the
argue
sole
here,
intent of this.
I would argue with this
draft.
idea, because then it's a question of trust. Do I have the right to be able to choose whom to trust and whom not to trust with my identity on a system? And from a proportionality perspective, are you going to hold a few people, are you going to hold the entire, are you going to force the entire population to identify themselves for the purpose of being able to identify a handful that might be committing fraud, right? So there is a question of proportionality and privacy over here, which the Supreme Court has already addressed. And in the Puttaswamy judgment, they have recognized the right to be anonymous.
Yes.
This removes the right to be anonymous, effectively. And I think Apar is going to be speaking about some of the stuff when he comes, but I would question that the rationale behind, just because a few people, like it's like knives, right? If a handful of people commit murders using knives, do you then ban knives?
No, I don't think that is the intent. But yeah, there needs to be
But
little
that is the
discussion with the government.
But that is the
on this topic.
implication here, right? You're forcing people to identify themselves when it's not a necessary requirement, is all I'm arguing. Sorry.
Just wanted to understand how any of this helps prevent frauds. Right? I mean, at best, probably would be helpful to investigate frauds. But even if you were to make a database of fraudulent numbers, that means the fraud at some point of time has already occurred. And then you put those numbers in a database. Right? And the modus operandi is, if fraud is never straightforward, we'll keep moving and keep changing. So how does it change? For regulated sectors, all those processes already exist for payment aggregators and stuff like that. And I think last year RBI was mulling an idea of creating a centralized negative list for payment aggregators to put fraudulent merchants on it. But again, that threw up a lot of problems, like who's going to host that data, and will it be mandatory for other players to sort of act on that data, because everybody has different business policies and risk thresholds. So if fraud prevention is a problem, I don't know how this sort of solves for it.
Anyone?
So it's just not really fraud prevention. I mean, today we face a lot of frauds, right? The same number is being used to do frauds at multiple places. Not that he can't change the number. So it's the name and the number which kind of helps you to identify such frauds. We've seen a claim settlement fraud in Policy Bazaar, and the same guy has also taken a loan through Paisa Bazaar. So I'm sure this will help to a certain extent. But fraudsters always are one step ahead of you, right? They'll keep finding more newer ways to do it.
But this also doesn't address mule accounts, right? So just because you know a name doesn't mean that they haven't used a mule account, then they won't use the name of that mule account, right?
Agreed.
So this doesn't necessarily help.
It doesn't. See, it's just
So then what does it do?
I don't know. We can keep debating this.
So the regulatory intent and the rationale behind the intent is not clear then. Anyone?
I don't think so. We're talking about frauds at all. We spoke about frauds here.
No.
Cybersecurity is an natural,
The cybersecurity element here is about frauds, and I think Kamya specified that they had said that this is one of the mechanisms.
Yeah, for the original rules, it definitely did. Yeah.
And this is the change of the rules, so the intent remains the same.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
Anyone else? Hunar, your mic's on.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that that is the effectiveness part that I was talking about. I think we should deal with that question first. Mandatory comes later, right? Like, what is the purpose and is it effective? What is the intent? Is it effective? And I mean, like, there could be arguments like we want everybody to re-verify KYC so that it's it's kind of distributed KYC responsibility. But I mean, that's totally disproportionate. It
Also,
doesn't make
shouldn't
sense.
the pricing be left to market forces?
Yeah,
Instead of 1.5 and 3 rupees being, I haven't seen pricing as a part of a regulatory, like a government, like a rule saying this is going to be the price.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. I think there might be value in this, but it should be left to the market, right? People who see value will automatically subscribe to the database, pay for it. And if the government thinks that there is a business that is high risk enough to mandatorily do it, then they can mandate it. It's like a KYC mandate, right? That's fine. But making it mandatory across the board doesn't make sense.
Sorry, pricing kahan se aaya, we don't know. Is there a background to that? Has somebody given some proposals that we are willing to do this? Is it going to be outsourced? We don't know. So what is the logic of 1.5 to 3 rupees?
वो सिस्टम का P&L कैलकुलेशन होगा ना कि when is there sufficient cash flow that contributes to the national exchequer. Sorry, anyone else? There's a mic back there, then we'll come to couple. So there also. Okay, come first. First, yeah.
Hello. Just an observation. The structure of the telecom market in India is 90% is what is called prepaid, and about 10% odd is postpaid. Now, in the prepaid, the SIM card is sold, particularly in smaller towns and all that. There will be one person having one mobile phone, but he'll have 5 SIM cards in his pocket. These are all prepaid connections. Now, if you look at the prepaid connection, if you see the incoming outgoing ratio, some of the prepaid phones, SIM cards, will have only outgoing calls, no incoming calls. That means that person is using that SIM card not as identifying himself. He's doing whatever he's doing. I'm not saying he's always doing a fraud. It's only for outgoing calls. And the telecom regulator and the telecom operators, I mean, I'm an ex-operator guy, I'm Shukant today. They all do this analysis all the time. And about recently, 13.6 million mobile subscribers were disconnected. So this is just an observation that the structure of the market is such, it's easy to be anonymous, as Nikhil always saying, because prepaid is more anonymous than postpaid. Number two, you have got a field where you can do tons of fraud because the structure of the market is like that.
I'll let Vikram address that about, is it easy to be anonymous on prepaid? I don't think so, right? After all these systems, Vikram?
No.
So, Mike, just here, please, sorry. Then we'll go back there. Yeah. We'll just come back.
Thank you. This is Vikram from Syria. So, Sukant, interesting point. So, firstly, it's 98%, 10-2%. Prepaid, postpaid. So, people keeping multiple SIMs and some for outgoing, some for incoming. I think, I don't know why it's very applicable in this discussion. I'm not
But is it possible to be largely anonymous on prepaid compared to postpaid?
No,
or compared to anything else?
The rules are the same.
The KYC not the same. So there's no.
Okay.
It's only the thing is about the mule accounts. Maybe if I get opportunity.
No, go ahead. Just finish on the mule accounts because that's important.
No, so let me take since I get mine. Now, where is the government coming from? You see, there is a serious problem of both cybersecurity plus fraud. Which is the most prevalent KYC? Is the mobile number KYC. That's it. Right? That's the most prevalent, most updated, most monitored.
Correct.
Compared to any other KYC.
Correct.
Right? So, the intent of the government is how now you have the networks, you have compute, you have AI. How can I squeeze more juice out of this national resource? Right? That is where the government's coming from. And put it to greater use across sectors.
Yeah.
That is the intention.
Understood.
Right?
So I have a counterpoint here. Very simple.
Yeah.
Clearly, this has great utility, right? For businesses that want to validate a name, for example, right? Why is it that this system can just be made available
people can be informed. Whoever wants to integrate, use it, they can use it. Why does this have to be a part of our national telecom regulations to A, mandate using it, B, put a pricing on it? Why does it have to be a regulatory framework instead of saying, here's the system, whoever has utility, sign up, use it, don't want to use it, don't use it. Market forces will determine pricing. If there's low demand, they'll reduce the price. Why does it have to be a part of my country's regulatory framework?
Okay, so here's where, my understanding is that in MHA, right, different verticals are under a lot of public demand to curb fraud or, various illegal activity. Right?
Correct.
Now here is a resource that they want to put to good use. Now who is the owning department who can issue those rules? It is the Department of Telecom, right? So that is the reason why this is figured here. It is seems to the part. I think part of it is in the draft NTP. I think one of the gentlemen that's mentioned, right? Yeah. And to that point, it would not be limited to, for example, they quoted in the NTP, which is again a draft. And I think somebody mentioned whether it's the insurance vertical or the health vertical or the e-commerce vertical, whichever. Both verticals, depending on if they wish to curb or mitigate fraud, can request their respective regulated entities to exploit this resource. Right. So this amendment by itself is very operational to my mind. Right? They are providing a platform and they have suggested how to use this platform. Whereas the oversight and the governing is part of the cybersecurity rules which were issued earlier. So this particular thing that we are discussing today is only about how to further squeeze more juice out of the KYC attached to the mobile number, right? That's the approach.
Yeah, I somehow don't like the idea of a regulation being used for meeting a business model concern.
I mean, I see three of the gentlemen there. They are looking at it providing value, and there are only three people here, right?
Yeah.
So that's how.
No, okay. Sorry, there and then there. Yes, we'll definitely come to you. Yes.
We are talking about the rule, which is a subordinate legislation under the principal act. Is it possible to introduce a definitional entity under a subordinate legislation? Not even to that extent, we introduce a monetizing mechanism over that. So fundamental question is whether this is possible as part of a subordinate legislation or not. Scope defined definitional.
So there are no lawyers on the panel, but I can tell you. Sorry, Seema can take it. Sorry, Seema's a lawyer. But before that, let me just say that I can give you multiple other instances, including the IT rules in 2021, where subordinate legislation has created definitions, even though they're not a part of the core act, and the subordinate. The Committee for Subordinate Legislation has looked at those rules and okayed them. So, precedence is there that.
Not from the financial side.
Not from the financial side, fair enough.
We've spoken about one person having 5 SIM cards, but we've not spoken about one mobile being used by 5 people.
We haven't done that.
What that does, when different people use that same mobile number for different services under their name, how does that verification take place? Because the same is issued to one person, but the OTT users on that mobile phone can be a number of them.
Fair point.
So I think what if you just keep getting rejected from those services unless you use the mobile number's name for the OTT service?
Anyone? Shared mobile devices?
From a business perspective, it's I think that's we don't come across these kind of use cases. Possibly they are happening, but this is today's penetration. If you look at the mobile penetration, I mean, in terms of the strata that we're talking about, there will be some strata which will be left out because of this. So government has to find some.
Approximately 700 million unique mobile users. 700 million, I would say, out of 1.1 billion connections. Multi-SIM usage, some of us have 5 numbers and some of us have 4 numbers. Yeah. Fair enough.
I think probably she's referring to
shared devices, single household.
From the same phone number from different people.
No, single household, one number in a household.
Especially when we see kids being more digitally active, right? So they use maybe their parents' phone number, a wife might be using her husband's phone number. I think those realities are not captured in the designing of this regulation.
So, you know what this is doing, this Vikram here. The SIM is a subscriber identity module, is for one person, right? If more than one person is using it or misusing it, the person whose name is attached to the SIM is the liable entity.
No, that's okay. So I'm saying that
That's what it's doing.
that
That's all.
effectively will scope out, let's say, a child using an education platform by using that mobile number and signing up.
There is no problem if the child is using an education platform and not creating or undermining cybersecurity. This is for cybersecurity.
Yeah, but that's the scoping that the regulation doesn't do. The kind of discretion there is completely
So if there's an, so let me, if there's an educational platform, and you need a mobile number to sign up and sign in, and the child signs up using the parent's number because the child's not been given a mobile number yet, and the name that pops up is the parent's, effectively that's a rejection.
No.
It's a rejection because the name doesn't conform with the, doesn't.
When are you initiating a request to validate? You are initiating a request, either one of the businesses, when they want to validate for a business purpose or for a cyber security purpose, to validate the usage of that TIUE, right?
Correct.
So if the TIUE is being used legit, it will pass.
No, but the TIUE can be mandated by a sectoral regulator to do this validation, in which case it could lead to rejection.
If the sectoral regulator is going to be so daft, then it's difficult.
I think
they have to provide the education service, and if they are going to say a child using it and it's going to get rejected, hey, come on, man, you're wanting to provide education service, right?
This all happens in real time.
No, but
it doesn't happen.
This.
That's what I'm saying. The regulation doesn't guard against this darkness. So we will always have to hope that the regulator is
Good. So it's a draft. Put in your input.
That's good.
No, I think it's a valid point that shared devices are it effectively it assumes a privilege that not everyone has, which is the point that you're making.
See, that's the second part, which so far it has not come up for discussion. The IMEI part. We've only focused on the mobile number part so far, right? The IMEI part, again, the government's coming from, and they got a request for resellers. You know, guys like Amazon, when you're buying back a phone, and then they've set up Chakshu, right? So how
They've set up what?
Chakshu.
That's a new one, is it?
That's a new one.
Okay, good, Chakshu. Like.
What is it?
Maybe somebody.
No, you give us new. You tell us new things every time.
It is another facility on, I think, Sanchar Sathi, which is the main app, for where you can report, like a CEI, I think, lost phones, and
Oh yes, of course, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Now, so there was a demand that the data available with the DoT, how can business entities use it? So that's the second part, which is the IMEI and the 10 buck part, right? Because when they are refurbishing phones or and reselling them, whether the owner of that phone is valid or it's a stolen phone. So that's the second part.
So you mean like a car registration, when you sell your device, you'll have to transfer the ownership of the device to the third party, and there's going to be a full regulatory process around it.
No,
like you sell your car, you have to go and change the registration or something like that, right?
They can stick to the mobile phone.
So in this case, when you're selling the mobile phone,
has a TI or telecom identifier, IMEI.
Okay.
Right. When I buy the phone, my IMEI gets tied into my mobile number by the telecom operator.
Okay.
Right? There's a tie-up at the back. When I change, if the mobile goes and gets tied up to another phone number, then that has to change and get recorded. So that's what is the second part.
Okay. Any last comments? We're out of time. Yes, sorry, Kapil. Anyone else? Quick comments? Questions?
Yeah, Kapil.
Hi, Kapil Chaudhary, Dentons. Just a couple of points, Nikhil, which is denial of service and access.
Hold the mic back, yeah.
Denial of service and access, which is, I think, Rule 5, Sub-Rule 6 and 5.8, which is kind of conflating the issue because the government can now direct OTTs to suspend provision of services. Now, this will create a big issue because it's technologically infeasible. OTTs are not the right entity to, kind of cut off access because the telecom service providers are the ones who control.
No, so for example, if let's say Seema's told that here's a mobile number, stop providing Truecaller services to this person, they will have to shut down providing services to that person.
But the way the rule is currently worded, it's casting the onus on Truecaller to do this.
Correct.
Whereas I don't know if you have technologically are empowered to do that because you're not a telecom regulated entity.
No, you are after these rules, right? Every one of these entities and every internet company in the country becomes a telecom regulated entity after
Which is this whole issue on jurisdictional overlap because under the IT Act and the rules, there is already a process on content takedowns and lawful requests.
Correct.
This conflates that because
this
now the
bypasses
DoT becomes a super regulator.
This bypasses it
Absolutely.
and removes all the protections that exist under the IT Act.
The second spanner in the works
and then you live the life that telecom operators live, which is
Absolutely.
basically mandates of DoT apply to you.
Also, Nikhil, there's this whole issue of purpose limitation, we'll be faced with it once the DPDP rules are out, which is you are collecting this data for a specific purpose, which is cybersecurity.
Okay.
But there are going to be questions on retention requirements, and ultimately, where are you going to store this data, for how long, and then deletion, and then are you then using this also for other purposes? So legitimate businesses, in their privacy policies, etc., are going to say, while we are collecting this data for cybersecurity, you are obviously going to commercialize this data as well, right? So I just wanted to call out those two important aspects which are going to be dealt with, and they need to be clarified.
Sub, how long are telecom operators required to retain data?
Post-termination, it is 3 years.
3 years post-termination.
The CAF data, the customer application form data, only that data.
Understood. But also there is other data like metadata which is supposed to be stored for a period of time,
There
right?
is no mandate on that. Post-termination, the CDR retention is there under the license conditions, that is for 2 years.
CDR is, so call data records are for 2 years?
2 years, and customer application form data 3 years post-disconnection.
And the rest of it happens through centralized monitoring system anyway. Fair enough.
No.
Rest of monitoring, I mean.
That is interception monitoring.
That is interception monitoring.
Yeah, that is different.
So interception requirements, if you're a telecom entity, might also come to internet companies for all you know. But let's hope, I mean, my thing is I hope that internet companies don't have to be, have to suffer as much as telecom operators do.
Because at least telcos will be monetizing this resource, right? So TIUs will be worse off rather sponsoring this cost.
No, I have my sympathies for telecom operators and how much they have to deal with onerous regulations. I am, as you know, in support of reducing the onerous regulations on telecom operators, Vikram. But I just hope the internet doesn't have to suffer them. Thank you all for joining us. It was a great conversation. If you'd want, please stay on. We're going to discuss the legal aspects post-tea. There's tea outside in case anyone wants. We're running a little short on time. So about 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes, we'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before the panel, we'll have a brief keynote from Apar Gupta. He's the founder director, Internet Freedom Foundation. On the panel, we have him, Aman Taneja, partner Ikigai Law, Krishank Jugiani, senior research associate, CUTS International, and Vartika Mishra, director of policy, NASCOM. If she can join us, she'll be coming in by 4. Apar, go ahead. The rest of the panelists, can you please come take your seat?
Thank you so much, Kamya. There is no substantive keynote as such, which I'll be delivering, because I think what may be much more useful is certain structuring, which also comes from questions which Kamya has sent in advance. So there are 3 broad bullet points which I think may be useful to this discussion, which also pick up from the last panel. The first is with respect to the jurisdictional overlap and questions on how regulation and how different ministries of the union government may be able to coordinate amongst each other in a manner as better indicated through the business of allocation rules. The second will be with respect to the vagueness in some of the provisions and the language of the draft amendments, but this flows back to a problem with the Parent Act as well as with the original cybersecurity rules. And the third, which I'd like to cover, especially comes from our work at Internet Freedom Foundation as to what is the impact on the rights of users who are the ultimate users of telecom networks as well as digital services. So firstly, with respect to the jurisdictional overlaps which are emerging, some of my writing has indicated that there is an increasing merger between the Department of Telecom and the Ministry of Communications and the Ministry of Electronics and Technology. This is inevitable and will happen over a period of time across different rules and regulations. And another government ministry which I think is adjacent to their functions is the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. The pre-existing divisions and demarcations which were there of content and carriage or which were in place through the business of allocation rules will come under increased tension. And quite often there will be a tendency for regulation even from other government departments, such as the rules which are being considered right now for enforcement by the Ministry of Health with respect to non-skippable insertion of non-skippable insertions and warnings with respect to tobacco. So what is required ultimately may be a digital function which is performed by different government ministries or coordination function which is performed by MIT itself, which requires a fresh imagination to look beyond the provisions of the IT Act as well as the business of allocation rules. The Information Technology Act is primarily a statute which was made to govern e-commerce and to provide recognition for it. There have been amendments which have been effected through legislatively through the 2008-9 amendment or the rules which have been made subsequently. We notice that there has been a ballooning of the concept of intermediaries, which has taken place over a period of time. But I think this model is under stress, so there will be need for the government to think through how issues which are existing today, but also will emerge over a period of time, may be better catered to. This also should acknowledge that there are certain historical tendencies which are present within different government ministries which come from its interactions as well as the scope of its authority, its exercise, its staffing and its funding over a period of time. The Ministry of Information Broadcasting will obviously have sufficient knowledge of the domain of information and broadcasting. It will have different arms which will look at newspapers or online news channels and is now trying to also gather more information about OTT streaming platforms. Similarly, if you look at the Department of Telecom or the Ministry of Communications, its traditional enforcement functions will emerge from telecom operators as well as other categories of licensed entities under the Telegraph Act or the Telecom Act. So I think this may need an interministerial committee, this may need a greater level of coordination for impacts which may occur beyond the principal stakeholder groups for each government ministry which it has been accustomed to over a period of time. And this goes beyond the language of a draft regulation. So the jurisdictional overlap is not only a question of law, it is also a policy which needs to be coordinated between different government departments for the policy objectives to be met. If the policy objective we are discussing, for instance, today is to prevent fraud which is occurring through the use of telecom networks. The second point I wanted to make is with respect to the definitional vagueness which is there in the law. If you look at the Telecommunications Act when it was passed or the consultation notice which was published, even at that point in time, the union government has been stating that it is undertaking an exercise in making legislation as per the plain English language. And the plain English language has been used by it so ordinary people can understand acts of legislation. This has been stated not only as an objective why the Telecommunication Act looks the way it does, which less number of sections, but also simplicity in its language by itself. And similarly, you may look at the Digital Data Protection Act as well. This is similarly present there. This is also present in several enactments. However, as I have written about it before, when you draft laws as per the expectation that on a first read, a person should be able to understand it with clear sentences, that sometimes involves a cost in which conditionality, nuance, and certain key anchors of the legislative draft are not taken into account. What are these? These may be how statutes are drafted, for instance, provisos, exceptions, subsections, which may bring incredible amounts of complexity. But what is the benefit in this is that there is a legislative basis for any delegated legislation which is made at a latter point in time and restricts the power of the union government to vary it again and again. Again, this may be seen both as a benefit or as a harm. The benefit may be cited is that it gives flexibility because the domain of regulation itself, which is technology, changes very rapidly. The business considerations change very rapidly. So it is needed that there needs to be some ambiguity in the law, and there needs to be a higher amount of scope of discretion for executive authorities to determine its application. However, the cost sometimes is that the primary principles which are there in the law itself are absent. The third is the impact on users by themselves. Today, mobile numbers by themselves are used as sign-up identifiers for services, not only for the private sector, but also as service provider, as essential components of public services. For instance, if you go on MyGov and you try to submit a consultation response, which many in this room may have attempted, you need to enter your mobile number. Or you may have tried to log into Zepto, etc. It doesn't ask for your email ID. It prompts you through an UI to use your mobile number. Now, a few years ago, people used to say, what happens if your Google account is disconnected? These are problems which may result in a person facing a high amount of harm with regard to a digital presence. But today, if a mobile number is disconnected by itself, it results in an incredible amount of harm to an ordinary Indian who may not even be connected to the internet. Here, again, there is a presumption of good faith that the government will not exercise its powers. If the security incident and its definition under the Act is vague, it will be done with a degree of responsibility, however, deeper degree of insight, transparency, as well as recourse for users may be what is needed, recognizing this reality which exists today. These faults may not be traced to the draft amendments which we may be discussing today, but may be faulted back to the parent legislation or also to the cybersecurity rules as and when they were passed originally itself. The Internet Freedom Foundation redlined provisions of this draft bill and provided comments to that. And it is our hope, as much as these suggestions were not accepted, it may be accepted through the course of time and on the basis of evidence as well as what comes to be borne in terms of impact in which these disconnections may take place. Another element which I think may be important for us beyond exclusion, beyond disconnection, may be what will be the use of a greater amount or repository of data if beyond a yes-no response, there are telecom identifiers which are used, and if it is used beyond cybersecurity incidents. Do we have a Data Protection Act, and do we have a, even if that Data Protection Act comes into force, do we have a regulatory agency which will have the powers of investigation that the data which is now mandated for businesses to store, will it be used only for the purposes which are set out in a regulation, which may be a certain cybersecurity regulation or these regulations? I think that's woefully absent. And there may be a bundling of business functions where businesses, we must remember, essentially serve shareholder profit if they are publicly listed, or if they are private businesses, they look towards increasing of, at least should look towards increasing their revenue and profitability, may use that same catchment of data for purposes which may be beyond cybersecurity. And this does happen. We may not know that this happens. Data broking is a business. Many businesses which are not primarily in the business of data broking also have a revenue stream for data broking. And even if they may not be disclosing the transactional data of the user. They may be building profiles around that user, thereby avoiding the regulations application and thereby conveniently offering it on an API-based access. There are news reports and as to its existence, and this is a model which I think will develop over a period of time. So I think with these 2 or 3 points, I look forward to hearing more from others and diving a little much more deeply into these draft amendments. Thank you, MediaNama, for having me here.
Thanks, Apar. I think that sets the stage for what we wanted to talk about very well. I will start with a question from the previous panel. I think could use some legal opinion, and this is for both Aman and Apar. Based on your interpretation of the draft amendment, is it compulsory for TIUEs to verify users through the MVN platform, or do they have alternative options? Is anybody within the scope of TIUE mandated to do verification this way? What do you think?
Kamya, I think to a large extent it will depend on the category in which the business entity operates, whether it's a licensed entity. I think telecom operators and the associated businesses will do it naturally. But over a period of time, as it's extended, we'll only get to know how enforcement is conducted. I don't think so any part of any rules is optional, but as we have seen through possibly the IT rules, the traceability mandate in that, there is no stay order by the Delhi High Court against it, but it's not yet enforced. The products have not changed. If you look at the cert in cybersecurity regulations, through private conversations, we know that its scope is not limited to any data controller which is specified within it as a significant high-risk category to which the rule only operates. However, if you ask most businesses, they may not have implemented those rules. So I don't think so it's optional, but I do not know how this regulation will be made enforceable by the DoT over a period of time. Aman may have an interpretation much more closely on the law.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, Apar, but I'll say this, just reading the rule as it is being drafted right now says 2 things. One, you could use the MNV platform suo moto, so anyone who wants, any TIUE who wants to could use this on its own volition or on a direction by the government, right? What is not clear at all is on what basis will the government make a decision as to mandate this, right? So there is, one, you could do it voluntarily, and there could be a situation where it could be certain sectors that they decide to make it mandatory for. It could be, even my imagination at some point fails to understand on what basis will that happen. And the complication for businesses that comes from that is, if I'm building out workflows which require mobile number, like Apar said, sign on as one use case, others earlier spoke about validation for other reasons. If I'm building out a workflow where I'm heavily relying on, using mobile numbers as part of that, do I have that certainty of knowing, well, in a few months' time, could I be now subject to regulation by the government under these rules or not? Can it become mandatory? Do I now start having to use the MNV platform? So that's a big gap that I see in the rules as they're drafted right now.
Just want to supplement for clarity. The reference Aman is making is to Rule 7A, Sub-Rule 2, and when he says government, I hope this is what he means, central or state government. So it's not only...
And it's central, state, or any agency authorized by the central or state government. So it could be...
Yes.
Who's going to do it, on what basis, and how do I know in advance to be able to even prepare myself?
So the only thing I will depart from this, as per the phrasing here, is that it's not as if there'll be one notification by the central government as to certain business entities or notices to them or industry sectors. It may also be the state government. Yeah, so it's broader in that sense. That's what I wanted to comment.
Yeah, I mean, there's no clarity on how this is going to come out, right? So that's worrying.
Krishank, I just wanted to, and this is again from the previous panel, we were discussing a lot about KYC, and I have read Katz's submission on the rules. So I just wanted to understand how effective is KYC right now as a means of verifying users, as a means of preventing fraud. What did you find in the research that you did for the comments?
So I think based on that we discussed in Cut's internal team, it was, we inferred that the frauds resulting from misuse of SIMs and telephone numbers could be one of the objective behind drafting of these draft amendment rules. So we did some research, and there are numbers to quote. Just someone pointed out today earlier that there have been around 13 million telecom numbers have been blocked, and there are reports coming out that CBIs and police agencies have busted some of the forged SIM networks that use forged documents and SIMs for these frauds. There was also a study by Telangana Cyber Bureau which found out that the point of sale agent at the local level, they are not very competent in verifying the documents and the claims made by the consumers. They are just normally the submission of the documents and issuing of the phone numbers. So these are some of the concerns when KYC, KYC, the issue emerges because of the lack of not a complete KYC or say a strong KYC mechanism in that regard.
Got it. Apar, I actually went through IFF submission to the original rules, and I remember the issue around lack of transparency in traffic data and how it's defined. And that issue also came up in the parliament, in the Rajya Sabha committee. So in that context, I was wondering if you have any thoughts on what, how the data that TIUs are supposed to submit to the DoT should be defined. How should that be clearer? How can that be made more specific to the purposes of cybersecurity?
Thank you, Kamya. That was a recommendation made by us on the draft cybersecurity rules in the public consultation, but many others have also made similar submissions. It was noticed because it was quite visible that this is something which may benefit from clarity, just greater specificity in its definition. For the benefit of the audience, I'll just read out what's the essence of this. The draft rules define traffic data and any other data. What should be there is essentially a log of what is the number, what is the communication, to whom that communication, the routing information which goes, and the timestamp which is there. However, when you look into a deeper level of the digital identifiers which are there, for instance, IP addresses, account registration records, etc., it goes beyond the ordinary definition of traffic data in that sense, and that is what is the concern here. I think a lot depends on how the platform is created. It's not yes or no, it's not three fields in that sense. So
it's not clear exactly how you can define the
exactly.
data.
And see, here's the thing. I understand the objective of the rules, and there is an actual threat to our digital economy due to the rising incidence of fraud. But we also should also ask ourselves, if the more data which we gather by saying that we are trying to prevent digital fraud, does that also lead or contribute to that kind of fraud occurring in the first instance, or that leads to surveillance-based risks? So the least amount of information which is necessary, language such as that, which is necessary to combat cyber fraud or traffic data, the least amount which is necessary, these are certain legal standards which are there in constitutional judgments. I think they can be refined and brought down to the language of the regulation. That was in our submission. So for instance, you should ask for the least amount, data minimization, etc. These kind of principles and language can be inserted, and I think that brings clarity over a period of time and also restricts serves the function while restricting any kind of overbroad gathering that creates additional risks.
Got it. Aman, on the side of the data access of the TIUEs, what sort of principles should be in place to guide that data access? Like, can I, let's say tomorrow, create a business, just a one-person business called Kamya Pandey Organization, and suddenly ask for people's data? Not what I'm trying to say. And suddenly ask to verify X, Y, and Z people. Is that something that should be allowed? What should be the limitations on access?
Sure. You mean using the MNV
Yeah,
platform
yeah.
as a business? I mean, well, on that specifically, I think the rules do make an attempt to limit the scope. If I could just pull that up, it does say that the validation under this rule shall be solely for the purpose of validation of customers or users associated with the telecom identifier for the purposes of the services linked to such identifier. So if you are providing a service for which you need to say validate users, there is some amount of a ring fencing that the rules try to do here, that that there's a purpose limitation being put into how you're using data that you get from the MNV platform. That's one.
Aman, if I may just jump in.
Yeah.
How does the DoT know that that purpose is being met? So, for example, the example that Apar was giving about data brokers, let's say I collect a random register of mobile numbers that someone has filled at a security guard's thing, and I want to build a database that I can then sell as a data broker. I can just start connecting to a system, inputting those mobile numbers and getting first and last name from that, and build my own database from scratch using third-party data. How does the DoT know that this data is actually for the purpose that it is meant for?
So, I mean, I think that's a fair question. The other thing we don't have clarity from these rules on is, for me to be onboarded to being a MNV user, like this business is a user of the MNV platform, is there any checks and balances in my ability to even start pinging this database? For instance, with Aadhaar, to be a user entity, there is certain requirements that you need to meet, etc. And that's how you get onboarded and have the ability to ping that database. Here, that doesn't seem to be the case. Or at least not something which is coming out specifically from the rules.
So, and for the purpose for which identification is being done, there are enough companies out there who collect the mobile number without the need for that mobile number, right? That mobile number doesn't, let's say for example, include any delivery of service on the mobile number itself, but let's say on an app that has no connection to the mobile number except maybe that it's a login.
Sure.
So how do you then figure from what you just read out, how does the DoT determine that this number, this validation is being done for the purpose of delivery of service to a mobile number in a sense, right?
Sure, and over there I'm not sure. I mean, again, they do also punt this back to applicable data protection regulation. So in some sense, their imagination, at least from the way it's drafted here, seems to suggest that what you need to be compliant with data protection law on whether.
Sorry, what's that? Data protection law, what is that?
Well, if the one we hope to have at some point, applicable laws relating to data protection is what these rules refer to.
So the IT Act, okay.
The IT Act or the SPDI rules under that for now, till we are also living in a world where there is a law which is on the books, not in force, may someday be. I think we've made that point, Nikhil. I don't think we need to labor it. But it does seem to punt it to, on whether or not you're complying with data protection laws is not something that the DoT is saying that they will be the ones ensuring. And as a business, there may be many circumstances where you're collecting personal data. This is one of many. And whether or not you're compliant is something that comes through when enforcement actions start happening through whenever the data protection law comes in. That's one. Yeah.
Yeah,
does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, thank you.
Krishank, the government can ask TIUEs to suspend the use of specific telecom identifiers. I wanted to understand how this would affect delivery of essential services. So, for instance, TIUE could be anything, right? Like, let's say if and this is what I understood, and the lawyers present here can correct me, but like, let's say a hospital collects phone numbers to sort of cross-check people or something, validate them. That would also be TIUE, right? So should you, let's say, be denied access to a hospital or a cab just because you have, affected the cybersecurity of telecom networks? How should this work? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think we are also also had inferred that any entity could be potentially included in the under the purview of these amendment rules. So it is clear that once the denial of services has happened, there is no mechanism of grievance redressal that is proposed in the rule. So I think at the minimum there should be at least a notification to the user if that is a genuine user, or let's say also a resolution window should be open. But then it also it also raises the question that it also puts the burden on the consumer to prove that they are the genuine user of the number.
So can I just take off from this? Is an interesting one. There is no grievance redressal here, but there is one in the IT Act. So Apar, if let's say my number's been, if my access to services been cut off under the telecom rules, can I still go and file a grievance redressal claim under the IT rules to get my number reinstated? And then what would supersede in this case? Would the IT rules supersede or would this supersede telecom? Because there's a clear conflict between the two, right? There's an overlap between the IT rules, the IT Act and these rules.
So the process which will be followed under the IT rules will be a complaint to the grievance officer of the significant
data fiduciary.
The SSMI.
SSMI.
So one, it would only apply in a narrow IT rules.
And even
only applies.
Let's say WhatsApp is instructed to shut down my WhatsApp number.
Okay.
And then I go to WhatsApp and say, and then I go compile a complaint to the grievance redressal officer under the IT rules.
Yes, but WhatsApp will respond there saying that it's done in pursuant to regulation.
Yeah.
It will cite a basis in law. And I think you can bet me on this, you won't get it back then.
Yeah, I mean, but again, the GAC, I don't think they have the authority to overturn a direction from the government on one of these directions, right? The GAC's mandate under the IT rules is also much narrower. It is in relation to your services from there, but if there's a legal order coming from somewhere else, I don't think
that's outside the policy documents of the service
provider itself.
Okay. So my grievance redressal and the IT rules doesn't work against this telecom.
The process under this will go back to Rule 5, according to me, because Rule 5 is where of the original rules, which are measures to protect and ensure telecom cyber security. So at least for disconnection, etc., there are processes there. But then again, the order which is passed by the central government in ordinary circumstances does happen through a notice, a response by you. But the order which is passed by it, you can file an appeal only with the central government. And emergency orders under that, you are provided that order subsequent to that disconnection. And then again, the appeal which you file is with the central government. I'm not aware of actual instances of how this process has worked, what has been disconnection, but I would imagine that if somebody's number is disconnected, their access to services on a daily basis will cause a high amount of harm towards them. And they will look towards utilizing another phone number, possibly of a relative, of a friend, without giving their own KYC records. So according to me, this may not result, if a disconnection happens of that number itself, of a security incident being established under Rule 5, I don't think so. There's a expeditious or a real remedy which is here.
So, but is there,
because the barrier for disconnection which is there here is not present here. It does require order, it does require written reasons, but the appellate process or the steps which need to be followed before that, are not being conducted independent of the central government itself. It's not like they have given it to a civil court or specialized body which they have made to look after this. I may be wrong. People may know how this is working much better.
But is there still a grievance redressal process in these rules, in the amended rules, or none at all?
So the grievance, there are insertions which are being made to the cybersecurity rules, Nikhil, and the cybersecurity rules under Rule 5 state that process, how it is followed. And broadly, so some people here may know the blocking rules which are there. You may know the process which is under there, right? Now, this is a diluted version of that. It does require a notice. In ordinary cases of disconnection or even suspension. Prior to that, notice needs to be sent. You can file your reply, and then an order is passed with reasons. You can appeal that, and all of that is there here. But
this notice is to the user or just the platform or the telecom company?
As per Rule 5, it has to go to the user, according to me.
I think it does. Rule 5 does make it clear it goes to the user.
Yeah?
But yeah.
Yeah?
One second, I'm also just looking for that.
Because at least the amended rules, it mentioned that the TIUE can contest the order within 30 days, but no mention of the user there at least. So that's the reason why I was clarifying.
The person to whom that's sub rule 3, so the person to whom a notice is issued, I don't know whether that's to prevent the entity itself from performing its functions, but number disconnection, I'm fairly clear.
Okay.
So if you look at the original rules, measures to protect and ensure telecom cybersecurity, the person to whom a notice is issued under sub-rule 2 says central government shall, after prima facie scrutiny of information received under sub-rule 1, identify telecom identifier whose use is alleged to have caused threat to telecom cybersecurity and identify the person to whom such telecom identifier has been issued by the telecom company and issue a notice to such person along with details thereof. So it goes to the person.
Are there any, and this is for Aman, are there any privacy risks emerging from the MVN platform itself? What sort of transparency do we need about its operations?
Okay. I mean, even before I get to the MNV platform, because one, we don't know too much about it, what are the safeguards that are being built in. I think one interesting thing, and even to the question that you posed to Apar, right, on the ability to seek data from TIUEs, that requirement actually extends irrespective of whether you're using the mobile number verification platform or not. Because of how the rules are structured, it's not limited to situations where you're if you are a TIUE, whether or not you use MNV, you are immediately you could receive requests for information from the government in those circumstances as well, right? So it's a much broader thing. So that itself is, and there are no clear kind of guardrails on what basis that will be, for what purpose that will be. So that itself is a privacy concern there. And similarly on the construct of the MNV, and I think there's been a lot of conversation on what are the data attributes that you are able to receive from the MNV platform, right, as a requesting entity. But one thing that has not come out clearly to me is also at the reverse is also true. The MNV is getting information about which user is trying to use which digital service fundamentally. So you're essentially being able, it's a centralized database of every mobile number user in the country, which then through every validation request, you're also able to profile into what services everyone is using. So it's not just limited to, and are there any safeguards around that? Are you going to restrain the MNV platform to not store this information? After it's yes, no ping or sending you this information, what happens to those logs?
So one of the speakers from the previous panel very clearly said that we would be willing to, that if we are able, like just a name is insufficient, but if we get information, for example, okay, how frequently have they recharged, when is the last time that they recharged, what is the amount of money that they've recharged for, what is the frequency of usage of the service. If you're able to get that kind of metadata, it strengthens their fraud prevention systems. And they also said that if we are able to get data in return, we're also willing to give data to strengthen the fraud prevention platform. Because of the business use case, that makes sense because of the amount of fraud that they see happening in the systems. Now, just curious about what are the users' rights in this situation, where this platform then may expand in the future to become, there are already fraud prevention platforms in the government, but may expand to start collecting data from TIUEs, as they are called, as opposed to just giving full name from mobile operators.
So what was your question?
What are the users' rights here in terms of just this kind of an activity where your activity information could actually be given back to the platform for profiling you at a centralized level?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there is that level of clarity which comes out from these rules.
But legally?
Legally, sure. I mean, under
the hypothetical data protection law that we have?
See, I think the risk there is that there are sufficient exemptions within that, the DPDP framework as well, where if there's a government order or a mandate coming from law, which could basically dilute all the requirements under the DPDP Act. So there is a genuine risk to user rights that I anticipate coming from there.
There's nothing that addresses not like this happening for one user, but in a systematic manner that where this data is being collected without there actually being cause for collecting this data.
I mean, the cause seems to be this larger construct of fraud prevention, etc. Right?
That's a general clause, but not specific to a user.
It isn't specific to a user, but if you see the DPDP exemptions also, that in 17 it talks about exemption in cases of in the interest of preventing a crime, or on the basis of lawful order by an entity entrusted with law enforcement, for instance. Those are two separate exemptions within the law. So consent, which is otherwise the construct one in that law, goes away.
So potentially, if there are 15 to 25,000 startups in India that would be using mobile numbers for authentication of users, there is a possibility that maybe in iteration 6 of this particular set of rules, government could start pulling data on user activity from all 25,000 of them.
Right now, I mean, and that's what I said, right? Like there's two ways the information is flowing. One is what you're getting from the MNV, and two is what's going to the MNV, and what is the restrictions on the people operating the MNV platform. It's completely silent on what that is. And while again, what the clause I read earlier said, you as someone who's pinging MNV, you're supposed to use it only for validation.
Yeah, there's no restriction on what the government will use.
There's no restriction on what the government is going to do with it. And from a user rights perspective, I'd love Apar to weigh in on this, but
we're all waiting for Apar to weigh in on this.
Yeah. You are creating, I think, potentially one of the largest honeypots of data with which you get to add on top of with every service that I as an internet user am using.
But you're also strengthening NatGrid.
Okay, at this point I'm going to punt to Apar if you want to come in, or if you want.
So even if you don't look at it from the perspective of the state interest in surveillance of an individual, maybe conducting activities which are not to its liking, just from the perspective of an ordinary user's rights, each user may use one telephone number on 10 different services, and I would just like to workshop this with all of you. And what is the name and what is the address you put that in that service? Just your name and address against that number. And then if the government is pinging for details to 10 providers on that one number, and then that platform is not informing you, there's no notice, right, when that pull side request comes. The business does not inform you. Or if that business pulls that information and is being charged, and the government is making money out of it. which is this in the schedule, and the government wants to make money off our data. It's stated so in the National Economic Survey.
Can we do a show of hands? How many people give absolutely, and this is not illegal, how many people give accurate information to every platform?
I'm not talking about political surveillance risks here. I'm not talking about
4
political
people,
surveillance risks.
5 people give accurate information.
I'm not talking about political surveillance risks here. I would like to make that very clear. I'm talking about the insecurity which will result over a period of time when different agencies of the central government gather our data, sell that data, take it from the private sector as well, and is a lack of a mere notice to you. At least after a year, you should have an ability of knowing who all has pulled your data. Quite often we make reference to countries which are digital by design, such as Estonia. While Estonia may not have sufficient safeguards which prevent the state from pulling your data requests, that ledger which is there, which they say is on a blockchain, is made available to the citizen who is impacted. So each time a police officer, for instance, queries the license information which is there, or the telephone number which is there, a police station does it, or even a municipal department does it, you get to know. So since that is absent, fundamentally in its design, there's no limitation because there's no transparency, and because there's no transparency, there are no news stories, there are no questions. And here, the economic incentive which is there is very strong. For the government to provide that data, there's a very strong economic incentive for companies to gather that data.
And we already
How
have a
long will
number
that
for
data
it,
be
right?
stored? Now, other things which build on to this. How
No.
long will that data which is pulled will be stored? Is it there in these draft rules?
Apart, can I just complete your previous point? The Vahan database, I think 144 companies bought, 144 crores about 4 years ago that when we filed an RTI. The Ministry of Road Transport and Highways raised 144 crores by selling private vehicle registration and driver license data to insurance companies and car manufacturers, OEMs, right? So we've already have an example of this happening. This scale can increase is what you're saying.
And even other databases, for instance, when you don't have a good data protection law, for people like us, it results in a high degree of annoyance whenever our car registrations are due, or if any startup founder goes and registers a company on the MCA database, they are bombarded. They have to use a proxy phone number, and even a company which used to offer proxy phone numbers was shut down, Dusra. So I'm talking purely divorced from the political risks which emerge from this system, from safeguards which need to be in any legislation, rather than punting it off to a mere reference to data protection standards, given that the Digital Data Protection Act, even if it is in effect, does not have a regulatory body. The Data Protection Board is merely an adjudicatory body for complaints on data breaches. And I was coming to other things. How long is that data stored? What is it used for? Who's it shared with? And what is the security which is there? Is there any independent oversight and accountability? And here, users are completely separated from this completely. I think, and if what we have seen in the past, even if you file proactive RTIs, what has occurred over a period of time has been, while there was one Delhi High Court decision that if you are if there's an interception order, there's a Vodafone case, I have an idea Vodafone case, one of them. There was one High Court order. It was stayed subsequently in the division bench. So you don't get to know when there's an interception order against you. You don't get to know anything, so there's no accountability. Similarly, when pull requests are here made for cybersecurity incidents are defined very, very loosely as any event that has an actual or a potential adverse effect on telecommunications cybersecurity. It's a circular definition. So I think this is a big problem. The state is looking to trade in data. The National Economic Survey makes it very, very clear, and that is going to lead to a greater degree of control and a lesser number of user rights which are there. One final thing on the RTI point. certain was exempted from the RTI Act because some people were filing RTIs with it and getting some answers every now and then. And I expect certain exemptions to come in place or information not to be provided even through the RT Act over a period of time.
Are there any questions from the audience? I know we have a hard stop at 5, so I want to incorporate people's questions.
How do you also interplay this with the requirement of the mandatory data deletion for e-commerce companies and online gaming intermediaries unless you have a fresh consent every 3 years? I think that dynamic will come into play because a lot of these, although telecom is not in that category, but these two categories, e-commerce and online gaming, would be hugely impacted because they do collect a lot of KYC data. So this is in the draft rules, right? The draft
Schedule 3.
Correct. So, now that will be interesting because unless you have these fresh consents.
But leave aside this draft, that doesn't match with certain cybersecurity data retention requirements.
Correct.
Which is why I was saying that there needs to be an interministerial group which possibly meets every week, given if the digital economy is your main plank and engine of economic progress, it's where you're looking to make policies, you have to make those policies clear for your businesses.
Yeah. That was just one thing, I thought I'd flag.
Sure. Anything else? Anybody? So moving on, I think jurisdictional and regulatory overlap, you already mentioned a bit of it to begin with, but I think just wanted to understand if there are any legal precedents that exist for telecom style regulation for digital platforms. I mean, I know they do, but it would be good to sort of get that information to everybody else as well. Legal precedents for extending telecom style regulation to digital platforms.
I mean, that was also what the earlier version of the telecom bill was trying to do. And then we were assured that it would not apply to all digital businesses and OTTs. But what seems to have happened is what you couldn't do kind of through the Parent Act is now coming in through delegated legislation, which is anyway a trend. It's an interesting one, right? Like delegated legislation does give you the ability to move with a certain amount of speed, which might be required in a lot of in a lot of tech spaces where that might be necessary. But at the same time, are you operating within the contours of the delegation of power is another question that I think these rules also raise, right? By effectively, everyone who uses a mobile number is a TIUE, which is a tongue twister in itself. But that then creates, so you're subject now to Telecom Act regulation, although at the time of passing the Telecom Act, you were assured that we've written it simply, plainly, but that does not mean it is going to cover OTTs, but it seems to now be doing that, which is also a worry that I see. And bringing in one style of regulation for others is not something that's new. We saw it last year with broadcasting as well. And I don't think we're going to stop seeing that anytime soon either.
No, I'm just thinking about the if a mobile number is being used, and I said this in the last panel as well, if it's mobile number is being used to bring telecom, like internet users and internet companies under telecom regulation, then basically any retailer that uses a CRM or a customer database where they're storing someone's mobile number and email address can effectively come under the same regulation as well. And MeitY can also say if you're using email address and that is an internet identifier, and therefore anyone who's storing an email address will be regulated under the IT Act. Is there precedence for this usage of a telecom, like of a mobile number for extending jurisdiction like this, or any other instance in which something like this is like just an identifier is used to extend jurisdiction to an entity?
I'm not sure. I will have to check. Do you have an example in mind, Nikhil?
No, I don't. That's why I'm asking.
But you're using a telecom number. Why are you using your telecom number in your service provision?
Why am I using an email address?
Just use an email address then.
No, but if I'm using an email address and I would, let's say if I run a retail store,
It's
right?
the price, it's
and
the
I use
cost
an email
of
address.
using a mobile number now.
Similarly, cost of using, so if I run a store and I
I
save
don't
an
agree
email
with
address.
what I'm saying right now.
I
I'm
know
just-
what you're saying, yeah.
No, but Abhar, specifically previous panel I'd asked that question, that will people start moving away from using mobile numbers
They
to
can't,
email?
right?
And
No.
then they practically
No,
can't.
They
no,
can't.
because that's not a user choice, that's a business choice. The business will continue wanting your mobile number because then the user record has more stickiness to it. It has a long, and the delivery mechanism for that is not only limited to the notification on the smartphone.
That's not what we got from the businesses. For the businesses, their challenge is most people don't have email addresses. So mobile is a primary identifier.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so it's not even a business decision, it's the only option that they have.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So no one has a choice over here. You can't move to email if you don't have email. So therefore, that's what I said.
I mean, but there is some elements of stickiness that.
If
Abhar
there are
is-
25,000,
he's right.
if there are 25,000 startups in this country, almost all of them are using mobile numbers as a means for someone to log in via an OTP. And it's not just Indian companies, international companies have also now started using mobile numbers as a means of validating users for them to log in. Because they want to ensure that people don't, let's say for example, start multiple accounts by creating multiple email addresses, because mobile number.
The flow is better.
The flow is better, right? So with all of this, effectively what does it mean for international businesses that use, that authenticate Indian users, because Indian users primarily use mobile numbers? Two, what does it mean for Indian businesses very clearly don't have a choice. They can only use mobile numbers because most people don't have email addresses. So invariably 25,000 Indian startups, if there are 25,000 Indian startups in the country, every one of them becomes a TIUE.
And then a state government may decide that you have one specific user and it needs its details, and then may require you, if there are multiple such users on your platform, if it can identify.
So they might as well shut down MeitY, right?
No,
There's no point of having MeitY.
No.
IT Act की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है.
No, IT
Telecom Act will be fine.
No,
They'll cover everything.
I think
They become-
MeitY as a ministry serves a lot of purposes.
But there's a clear, overlap between the two, ना? क्या फायदा? एक ही को रखो, merge कर लो.
But sometimes you need
Digital communication
But
registry
sometimes
बना
you
लो.
need more than one person in a family to do. Like you need Pandavas. You need, you know, like I'm using some of that language. But please excuse me. But here's the thing, Nikhil. I think over a period of time, this regulations application will manifest itself and will be metered as to how the government wants to do it, especially because it's a rule, especially because it will be amended over time. Businesses will face some degree of regulatory uncertainty. There will be costs which will go up, but I think there are business models which will also be built around this. So I don't think so it's going to impact 25,000 startups so immediately in that sense. It's something which is incrementally going to build up over time. And of course, I don't agree with a lot of parts of it, but I think this is what is there also primarily in the telecom cybersecurity regulations. This is a manifestation of trying to enforce it in a stricter manner.
Okay.
Making it enforceable. I think that's what's happening here.
So the mobile number is the TIUE, right? Now I take that mobile number, activate my whatever WhatsApp or a OTT account. That continues to work, and I can throw away the mobile number. Then what is the let's say liability of that OTT? If the government, let's say one is somebody pings, whom does this belong to? So it belonged to some person, right? And that person, okay, maybe changed or he's not using it. But that OTT continues to work.
Yes.
And for that 6 months. And that is where the cyber arrests are happening.
Yes.
So how do we address that? Now, I hope the point was clear, right?
Are you trying to say that for when, let's say I register the WhatsApp account and then I discard the SIM card, and then there's a 6-month period before it is brought back into the pool, and so I have a 6-month free run to commit cyber arrest and stuff like that using that service. How do these rules prevent that in the 6-month period? That's the question, right? I think pretty obvious. They don't.
I mean, is there a point that you're trying to land? I'm just curious as to which way you're going.
The background is, we've been having this conversation with CEIB, that's Central Economic Information Intelligence Bureau.
Mm-hmm.
So the conversation is that mule accounts and this cyber arrests.
Sure.
One are happening. The mule account is to sell your bank account to transfer money and not be traced, right?
Yeah.
But the fraudulent activity is predominantly over video or the cyber, right? And this, of course, is not going that far, but that is an area which is, of concern to the government.
No, sure, but I mean, my question then is the creation of potentially one of the largest centralized databases of all internet users a solution to that problem?
So let me try. Firstly, the MNV is not a centralized database, to my understanding, right?
Okay.
It is a platform through which you raise a query. That query will be addressed to the concerned TSP.
Okay.
Or to Astra, right?
No, Astra is different.
Astra is a database.
No. Astra is a usage of a database.
Who has the database?
So the centralized database is with the DoT, because all telcos provide the KYC and the incremental changes to the KYC to the term cells, right, or to the DIU or whatever. And on that centralized database, they run Astra, they run whatever, multiple, algorithms, okay? Now, in this case, I'm also trying to figure out, the MNB will be a through me platform.
It's a pathway, okay.
Yeah,
It's not one consolidated database.
That consolidated database is held by the Department of Telecom for their purposes, okay? So the MNV's functioning is still open to, and the second part is the formats and the number of fields that can be queried on the MNV. Right? Because what the gentleman, that insurance guy was saying, that he might want a pattern and something.
So that's not clear about what the MNV will have.
I can't read it in the thing.
It's not in the rules.
But the other thing is, how many fraud prevention databases do we have? There's this FRE or whatever that was mentioned. There is this MNV. How many?
I don't think the FRI started yet.
There's a question. But go on.
Take it. It's a draft, I think.
Okay.
The FRI, I heard about it last week onwards.
So if the FRI is there, then what is this?
That's an index, right? How are they making an index to, it would be something like a CIBIL score. I haven't seen the details, but that's my understanding.
So that is, whether you're a fraudulent person or not, you will be, so it's like a very simple, it's like a social credit system.
Kind of.
Kind of,
Should
yeah,
be.
like a social credit system.
Yeah, but I haven't read what it's about yet. But basically, it will be an index or some kind of rating for, I don't know, who.
For people.
Will it be about
what level of fraud are you? Are you fraud level 1, fraud level 2, fraud level 3? It will basically judge you as a person whether you are a fraud or not. Like you have a CIBIL score, you have a social credit score under FRE, no?
So, yeah, let's see.
But I'm just saying, how many databases do we actually need for this kind of a thing, right? So, if the purpose of the FRE and the purpose of this MNV is the same, why do we have MNV?
I'm not sure whether the purpose is the same.
What is the purpose of the MNV?
I also have a point here. Like, isn't this sort of a post thing? Like, post the frauds are happening, post that is happening, but the root cause, that is the issue of the number of misuse, is still gonna be present. So the MNV platform will only be only be helpful when the number is being used for any fraudulent activity. So that is it's kind of like a post thing.
So far, to my understanding, is that the banks have their internal system of raising a flag on some activity, and they have different levels around that. Okay. So the JOCR, and we are also having a conversation with TRAI on the what's it called, the consumer acquisition thing, right? Consent acquisition form, right? So that's a pilot that's happening. There's another thing that's happening is with the GST, a pilot with GST because of input credit frauds. And again, the use of the mobile number. Essentially, like I said in the earlier session, that here is a database. Now the government wants to use it for various purposes. This is one of the purpose, which is attempting security and fraud.
And one of the databases out of many.
I mean, this is a very potent database because it is updated very regularly and monitored for correctness very often.
Understood. Tishi, you have the mic?
Yeah, sorry, it's an unrelated point, but I also want to talk about commercial privacy. When the so-called TIUE is required to verify their numbers and ask for information, there is no safeguard around the kind of information that the TIUE might be required to be shared with the government and with the TSP. So from the point of view of who are your users, how regularly are they your users, what is the change that you see in those user numbers, I think that's also a big problem for any commercial enterprise that will be classified as a TIUE. The kind of visibility basically the government and the TSP will have over your verification lists.
Correct. I mean, a roadmap could include taking a vast amount of information from the TIUEs to strengthen the database, so to speak, with user information, and also, like I said, profiling for the social credit system, so to speak.
No, but I think Trishi's point is actually interesting. She's talking about the implication for businesses as
Correct.
well, right? Like if you get a sense of how frequently my users use my platform, service, etc., that's valuable information for, especially if a TSP is getting into a competing line of business with me.
Ah, okay, from that perspective.
From that perspective also. So we don't know, right? We don't know.
But the TSP will know who's asking for information for in that sense as well, right?
The TSP, to my understanding as per this rule, is only responding to a request coming through the MNV. Now, who has initiated the request for what purpose is not happening.
It's not clear that that's the case though. The rules don't say that the rules, at least which set it up.
Any clarity chahiye yaar. It is only, they are saying that, okay, the request is, what are the fields, right? So that is what I said is open. What are the fields which are being requested for by whichever entity, either the business or the state government who's paying that 0, 1, 50 and 3, right? Those are the people initiating a request. So one is open question is whether on what basis a request is coming from the government. From business, it will depend on their business requirements, like what the...
But is it clear which business it's coming from? As say between Aman and Apar sitting here, if I were to ping, will
MNV.
Ping MNV, will
Yes.
will the TSP know that
No.
that request has come from?
No, I don't think so. MNV is not going to pass that on.
Yeah, there are no procedural safeguards.
We don't know.
for
Actually, that's the
kind of
problem is we don't know.
visibility.
Is the architecture, see, I also was assuming that this is going to be a centralized database. Today through you, I've learned that it's going to be a platform which will connect to individual databases, although there is a centralized database available. So none of this is coming out from the rules. I mean, it's just something, when we talk about transparency, we'd appreciate that. Like, I think we'd like to know.
So here's the transparency piece. That's why it's a draft.
Okay, fair. No, I mean, we've given comments.
Yeah, I mean, this seems like the Aadhaar database before the Puttaswamy judgment, right? So you know the purpose, you know the details. It's not just a yes or no ping. You don't know what kind of KYC information could be asked by the TIUE. Just in more than what,
And there could be misuse by the TIUE itself, right? So they might not just be asking for the information that suffices for their purposes, but all the information that is there on the customer acquisition form.
Whom are you referring to as a TIUE in this case? The TIUE is the holder of the mobile number.
No, sir. The TIUE is the person who's provisioning
The service to that mobile number.
TIUE is the internet business.
Yes,
Huh.
exactly.
You get
It's all businesses.
So if you look at Rule 7A, subsections 1, 2, 3 are for the government, 4, 5 are for business enterprises. For 2, it says clearly MNV platform. And it says a TIUA may suo motu or shall, upon a direction from the central or state government or an agency authorized by the central or state government, place a request on the MNV platform in the form and manner as specified therein. Form and manner as specified therein refers to the MNV platform. Hence, there is nothing in these rules through a schedule which limits the iteration of the MNV platform. And I've seen this most recently with what is called as the censorship Sahyog portal, which is essentially a portal for any authorized agency of the central government to issue a takedown order which goes to social media companies. When the government has argued for its constitutionality, it says there are safeguards. There are no safeguards in the office memorandum or the creation of that portal. It is there on the portal itself. So these are technical safeguards. These are not legal safeguards. And if you don't like it, they do have a solution, an update, a second version, a third version. I'm explaining the thinking. I'm not commenting as to its normative merit or deficiency. This is the way regulation is being designed today when we refer to our platforms. Through technical changes which are not tethered to acts of subordinate legislation which diverges from existing practices, constitutional practices of forms being there. In fact, somebody made a reference to the Aadhaar Act and the rules. There are draft forms there. There are forms there. But I agree the platform diverges from those forms and there are changes which occur in the software which are not then reflected in the law itself. So that's why you don't have it here. It is by intention.
So you're saying this regulation is responsive?
Yes, it is highly adaptable, it's flexible to the business needs, it recognizes the innovation which is required in the sector, and it is completely elastic. You can stretch it as much as you want. You can
As and when people complain, it will keep changing.
No,
It's
complain, interest, etc. And the conditions precedent for exercising this are merely a cybersecurity incident occurring or its anticipation. And you're completely right, this is a platform, it can be used to enrich other databases, but which database it enriches, how long it is stored, is not specified. And the safeguard which is there is that it should strictly be used for the purpose of that cybersecurity incident. However, if you look at rules 4 and 5, when a private platform makes such a request, which is to validate users, which is what it should intend it to do, and the data security which is required, there are no penalty provisions. Usually in regulations you have penalty provisions that if there is a authority, firstly you need to identify authority which identifies the misuse. Secondly, what is the sanction it can place on identification of that misuse, like issuance of a show cause or the termination of that entity from being there on the platform. These things are not present within these.
Isn't that there in the Act itself? The penalty provisions are there in the Act.
But I'm saying if
This rule is only an amendment.
no 7A, which creates the portal, you would like somebody who's misusing your portal to kick them off, right? That's the proportionate penalty, right? You can do other things as well. But the Act also applies to licensed entities much more closely than the ambit of who will be using this platform, right? So which is why I think at the very least there should be an identification of public authority and its scope of authority to then kick people off this platform who are just paying 1.5 rupees pulling in records and then ultimately not validating users because they may not be their users.
So very quickly, you had a point, then Aditi is there.
Yeah. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. So naturally, with the MNV validation, compliance costs for all the smaller player startups is going to shoot significantly. My question is more from the perspective of an end user, the economic implications. Can we expect this cost to trickle down on the end users? And B, are there any antitrust implications that need to be deliberated upon here? Like, are the startups going to trickle down this cost on us because it's increasing the costs on them? Compliance cost is going up.
That depends on whether it's mandatory for them or not. But if it is, then obviously the cost is going to trickle down in some shape or form. Someone has to pay for it. Either VCs will pay or users will pay.
Yeah.
Through platform fees.
Through platform fees. Yeah.
I think that's exactly the point that we brought down in the earlier panel, which is there will be issues on denial of service and access, because the moment, say, there are false positives or false negatives, and let's say a family of 5 using the same mobile number, and that one member fails for whatever reasons, you will be denying service to a consumer, and this could lead, as the lady rightly said, this would open up a plethora of issues on denial of access, consumer claims, as well as competition, because ultimately one platform will gain advantage and you'll have economies of scale, and whoever, and you're already building data moats as well, right? So there will be these issues which will come up. I think very, very rightly put, there would be consumer claims, there would be issues around competition and denial of service and access issues.
So there were 2 issues in particular that were raised. One was with households with a single shared device, what happens to those users. Second was there are instances where one person has basically got mobile numbers for the entire family under a common billing plan. And so therefore, for example, if his kids have mobile phones, when they were minors, they were under his name. So now they haven't transferred it to the individual user post facto after they're no longer minors. But again, there could be denial of service for them with respect to their mobile number as well. So 2 denial of service.
If I could put numbers to that. So we had done the impact assessment of the rules, and we have calculated some estimated amount. So we have done chose 3 platforms in mobility, food delivery, and payment. So basically, the amount that could potentially reach up to like annually hundreds or thousand crores, even if 10% of transactions or validations are required. This is based on if there is repeated validations. For startups, we said, for example, even if there are some studies that annually like 82 million orders per month are placed on startups. So even if 10% are let's say validated through phone number, so that could translate to 14 crores. So, and for startups, this could be a big amount.
I don't think this is an instance where every single transaction is being validated.
Yeah, I'm coming.
But
to
every single account is being validated.
Once
or twice in the year. Yeah.
Yeah, but that it's we don't think it's not clearly written. It is once or repeated.
It says OTP for validation of a provisioning of services. So let's say if there is the government can say that if you're transacting for more than 2,000 rupees on your platform, there's a transaction for that. It could be for every transaction as well.
But then they would have to add that to the rules, right, in the sense?
No, I'm saying the rules provide that kind of flexibility.
The direction to do it could be...
There needs to be a direction to do it then for that to happen.
The direction could take this form. It's not limited to just onboarding. It extends to provisioning of service. So tomorrow for anti-money laundering, etc., they could say that transactions higher than this need to go through that.
Okay, Aditi, last point, we got to wrap up. I think I've got signals that Habitat's changed its timings, basically. They're kicking us out earlier. Aditi?
Yeah, my question was related to what she had asked about commercial privacy. So what Vikram sir said, that we don't know that it will just be basic fields, but I'm wondering if for certain sectors, the kind of fields being requisitioned will be unique. For instance, if a Zerodha wants to verify my number, sends a request to the MNV because it's a TWE. So it sends a request to the MNV sends this request to Geo. Nothing in the rules says, but Vikram sir provided that clarity, as Aman said, that will the entirety of the request be forwarded, or will it just be like a yes-no thing?
We don't know.
We don't know, so assuming, to her point, let's say Zerodha needs 6 fields on me, and one of them is somewhat unique to a financial firm, and that has gone to Geo. The next request, I'm now signing up for Zepto. There are maybe 7 fields where 2 fields are unique to a food delivery service, again going to a Geo. Tomorrow, if Geo wants to get into food delivery business, I think they already are there, or if they finally need to have a product for Geo Financial Services, even though they are publicly listed, they could actually use this data. I think that is the point that she was making, and what is there within the rules, given the flexibility around in the form and manner prescribed, to be prescribed, etc.
What you're saying is they will know. So let's say if I'm a Zerodha customer and Geo wants to get into brokerage, and Zerodha is validated, let's say it's hundreds of millions of users using this platform.
There is a ready customer data set.
Geo has a ready customer data set that they can ping saying, so they know whose customers are on brokerages.
Exactly.
They can target people across
And
brokerages.
if you also know that a number 9650 was pinged through Zerodha, was pinged through Angel One, was pinged through
Dhan, Grow, lots of them.
yeah. These, and also through Tata Click Luxury.
Okay.
I can create a profile as Geo.
Yes.
And then use my Geo Mart or whichever Geo e-commerce service I have to then target them. Like, the reason I'm not
High-end services targeting. You can basically do customer segmentation
and also
because we're a
have
data-rich country.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think, and that, going to her point about allowing for greater provisioning of services, transactions above 2,000 rupees. So who are the people doing that? So that's not just it's both a commercial privacy risk and a personal privacy risk.
Correct.
So just giving that as an example.
Sorry, just an addendum, yes, to that, is that not only do TSPs have this visibility, bad actors will also have that visibility. So what's there stopping someone who claims to be a TIUE asking for XYZ numbers, their verification and their details, right? So I think that gives equal amount of visibility to a bad actor also.
Correct.
To be able to.
That is the first thing I said. If I'm a data broker, I have a register from that I buy from a security guard. I want to validate all the names and addresses. I can basically use this to ping and just validate and build a data set out of it. Last point.
Yeah, you don't have to be an entity also. The definition says a person. So
correct.
Any person can do that. You don't have to be
one of the points that IFF has raised in its submission as well about the person means that any individual.
Any individual person, but I'm having a mobile, they'll provide me an application and I can put the number and get the name, identifying information for any.
Then that's a major privacy risk, because if you get a number, you want a name.
Yeah,
right?
A name or whatever the details they are going to provide us, I don't know.
I don't think so the profile part is something we're not clear about yet, whether it will be just a name or, so there's no clarity on what is the information that will be passed on to the TIUE as well. But there is no limitation. But there is no limitation that's been placed. So those are things to ask for. I think we're completely out of time. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you guys. I hope this was a useful discussion. I know the submission date has gone, but please feel free to ping DoT about these regulations. We'll also be writing about this. This is one regulation that I think deserves to die, like so many others. But thank you everyone, and I'd like to thank PhonePe, Truecaller and Meta for supporting this discussion. Appreciate it. Thanks guys. Also, just in case anyone's interested, I'm putting together a workshop on AI and public policy, where basically I've been playing around with AI for 3 years now, and looking at it from a public policy lens as well. So we'll send a mail out in case anyone wants to sign up for that. This is going to be like end-to-end, both practical as well as policy on using AI and also understanding the policy implications of AI. Thanks.